TGIF. Hope you all have had a wonderful week. I know you are ready for the weekend to begin. So, welcome to the Just Ask Char advice channel. We will be getting started very soon. So get comfortable, get ready, and relax. We sincerely thank you all for your support. This channel is sponsored by you, the subscribers. When you want to hear another perspective for yourself or a friend, then just send an email for advice to JustAskChar@gmail.com. All right, we are ready to get this show started. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend. There will always be a perspective or some advice that someone can benefit from and use. Now, here's your host of the show, Char Willie.
Greetings, TGIF, everyone. How are you? Happy Friday. What's going on? What's happening? Whew. How was your week, everyone? Was it good? How was it? I'ma tell you, my goodness, it has been a long and rough week for me. Woo, my goodness. Let's see, what have I seen? Because I've seen quite a bit. Let me see. Well, of course, it didn't go to blows, but I seen a partial work argument, or I'll just say it was very intense of the disagreement. I'll say that. What else happened? Oh, this packaging service I use, they've lost 2 of my packages, and one they located, and then also they had not reached back out to me about the first package that was missing. And just one day, poof, there it was. No communication. I reached out back to customer service. They didn't say anything. I'm like, so this is how customer service is? If you're going to reach out to me, let me know what's going on during your research. That means communication. Nothing. I didn't get anything. So I end up going to Twitter to find out if anyone else was having issues with the company in Chicago, and they end up reaching back out to me. No one responded that they were having problems. And so I also asked about a little compensation. I'm like, dog, a little compensation? Hey, this is a paid service. This isn't like it's, a free delivery service or anything. I'm actually paying for this extra. Whereas an Amazon gift card. Everyone loves Amazon. So they apologized. They said they're going to look into it. They made notations of it, and they were going to send out that beautiful Amazon card. I'm like, oh, I just love Amazon. Thank you. But yeah, it's been something else, I tell you. The weather on Wednesday, it was 57 degrees. I'm like, my goodness, fall is really here. And but the winds were really high. The winds was, I think, up to 40 miles an hour. Gusts of up to 40 miles an hour. And I had went out to the store, and I had taken the bus, and the bus driver teased me with my coat. He said, "Oh, it must be wintertime." I said, "It is to me." And we laughed about it. I'm like, man, it is cold. I don't be playing with the folk. What you talking about? I am not playing. I had my gloves too. I was ready for that too. I didn't know how it was gonna be, so. But it was cold, and that coat felt good, and some people look like they wish they had theirs on. But I understand you trying to keep that last glimpse of your biceps out, or those bellies out, or whatever you're trying to show. I get it. I get it. But they were cold in Chicago. Oh yeah. But that's pretty much been my week. A long one. But I am excited about tonight's guest. I don't see him. I know I sent the link. Um, Hopefully he'll show up. But I will start because he gave me some reading material, and I can share my screen and we can go over some of that. I do have some questions. I did some Googling, and Google can only do so much as far as some of the phrases, or the phrases, the language, the slang, the terms. So hopefully he'll come up soon. Because I don't play. I'm telling you, I start on time as much as I can. Now, if I had a schedule that I, could not, well, that's another thing. But other than that, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. Let me start with bringing my screen up, and let's see here. Respectability politics. That is the title here. You never find a screen when you want it. Where the heck is it? I'm trying to close some of this stuff out. There you go. Chrome tab. It's in my email. Boop. All right. I feel like Saturday. But, I do share stuff on Friday night. But Saturday is when I'm really with the systems, bringing stuff up. All right. Where's my guest? Hello? Hello? Are you there? Hello? Well, I'll do my Friday dance, get it started, get it popping, on and popping. Let me pull that up. Gotta get warmed up here. But yeah, it's been a rough week, so I am as happy as a brother getting out of jail. So this would be the right Friday dance. So here we go, folk.
Look at her. We gon' talk this thing over. You all in the middle of that. Come on, come on. You a baby, I'm living my best life.
Hey, now, that's what I'm talking about. Ooh, I'm living my best Friday. I ain't going back and forth with you people, which I don't do that anyway. Why? Because I don't care. The way I look at it, you have your opinion, I have mine. Can't we all just get along? Yeah, that poor man, he passed away. He didn't even really have a long life, you know? And I think he didn't have much money after. Yeah, he didn't. Yeah, I think he ended up, as they say, dying broke. Wow, that's really sad. But anyway, let's see what we got here. I hear someone knocking at my door. Somebody's ringing my bell. Welcome, welcome. How are you?
I am good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you got a little sizzle, crack, and pop in the back.
Let me see. Now I'm looking for where I put you. Hold on just a second, Char. I
Okay.
just let me see. Hold on. Just give me just a second. I was
No worries.
almost not able to do it because my okay, let me do one more thing. Let me do one more thing.
Okay.
Let me come on. My system did some updates and I'm trying to see where everything is.
Ah.
I'm gonna pull this up. Hopefully it won't double speak, but let's see what we got. One moment.
Okay. You good so far, just to let you know.
Okay, cool. How about that? Is it double talk?
Mm, no, it didn't double talk.
Okay, cool.
All right, let me see if anyone mentions anything in the chat room. It's a little bit behind, but I don't hear anything on my end, so we should be good. So far, no one said nothing, so good. Cool beans. All right. All right, so I guess I'll start reading some stuff and then I'll ask you a question. You can explain and give me an update. I'll do half and then you do the other half if possible. Now, do you have a time constraint?
Pretty much I'm good right now. I kind of blocked off the time since you gave me enough time to put everything together.
Okay, cool, cool. All right, let me see. Make sure I'm sharing my screen. Sometime I don't do that and look like I see it, so I look like I am good. Yeah, okay, here we go. So let me bring it up here on my end where it's bigger print. My eye's a little tired too. Ugh. All right, Pookie and Ray Ray are the problem. Why respectability politics matter. If you want all of us, black, white, or other color, if you want us to respect you, if you want us to look at you in a different way, if you want us not to be afraid to walk down the same side of the street with you, if you want folks not to jump out of the elevator when you get on, if you want folks to stop following you around in stores when you're out shopping, if you want if you want somebody to offer you a job or an internship somewhere, if you don't want folks to be looking in or trying to go in a different direction when they see 2 or 20 of you coming down the street, then stop acting like idiots and fools out in the streets of the city of Philadelphia. And this was a quote by Mayor of Philadelphia, Michael Nutter, and he was the mayor January 2808 through January 2016. Okay, let me see. What can I ask about this? All right, now I don't act a fool in the street or anything like that, and I will be followed around in the store, and that I don't like. In fact, because of that, I won't even go into those beauty stores that a lot of ladies go in for their hair and nails and little stuff like that, trinkets. I don't even go in there. I would rather go to a store and just pay a little bit more money for a, just say, a hair comb. I can't stand those stores. I cannot. I feel very uncomfortable. So I don't act like an idiot fool, and some of these things happen to me. So could you describe what the mayor was talking about, if you know?
I'll try to do a little bit of that. I think that the people who were following you around in the store, Shar, were high value men trying to get your phone number, try to get a date or something like that. I think that's what was happening with you at those expensive stores that you hang out at.
I don't know about all that, but
I think that's what it was.
I don't know. I'm not for certain. I couldn't say that, but
But
I
if
have
you
been
go,
followed around though.
yeah, man, if you go down just a little bit where they show the picture of Pookie, Ray Ray, and his homeboys,
Okay, give me 1 second. Let me go to that screen. Oh no, that's the wrong screen. I got too many screens. Okay, calm down. Just take your time. Woosah! All right, here we go.
okay, all right. Well, basically, right now people are talking about the image of black men, black manhood. When we have an image of the typical young black man um, showing as a thug or a hoodlum, a rogue, someone who's violent and angry,
Mhm.
that's not the best image for us to have, especially in a society that devalues black manhood, who wants to assert a negative image of black manhood.
Mhm.
So when you have people who assert that this is the way to be, and this is promoted by a lot of mediums, like a lot of
Mhm.
media rather, where you have entertainment industry on one hand,
Mhm.
rap music culture, and this is supposedly the apex of black manhood, being a criminal, a thug, and a hoodlum, rather than having a PhD from the University of Michigan and being a regulatory scientist, or whether being having an MD, PhD and being a physician, or having a JD, MBA and being a personal injury lawyer who becomes a millionaire, or who becoming a school teacher. We need black male school teachers. Only 2% of school teachers are black men. And these boys need that type of leadership. But that's where I was kind of coming from, and that's why I kind of brought the quote from Mayor Michael Nutter on that.
Okay. Now, when he gave this quote, he was at a church, and do you know if he was running for mayor?
It
Because it
said it
sounded
was
like
about
it. Mhm.
2011, so he was already mayor. You only get 2 terms in Philadelphia, two
Mhm.
4-year terms, so I think he was out of it. He was on, let me see, I don't know how many terms, but I know he was mayor at the time already. I don't know if he was rerunning or not. There was some type of curfew that they were going to put together. People were kind of protesting that, so he went to the church to discuss what was going down.
Hmm. And what's your opinion about him going to the church for this particular situation? Was that something that you thought was a good place um, for him to go for whatever this situation? Because I don't know, what it was, but.
But I think that the black church, is still a strong institution. The first black church established in the United States, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, was started in Philadelphia by Bishop Allen. And so the church should be, it's not perfect, but it should be the place where we get our moral code. And so going to a place where we get our moral code is very important, and that we have to learn to, if we're going to get along as people, if we're going to work together, if we're going to build communities, we're going to build families, we have to have a code of ethics, a code of morality, so that we can treat each other respectfully,
Mhm.
and share a productive life together and productive spaces together. So I think that was a good place to start it. I think the church could be that moral institution that offers guidance to the family, the husband and wife working together, providing the type of environment for the children, or even if they're single parent households who are working in concert with productive Black institutions or other institutions like the church, schools, or whatever type of community institutions that are productive can offer the guidance that couples, parents need to raise productive children.
Hmm. Okay. I think this guy right here in the shades, I think he's all right.
Okay.
For some reason, I think he's posing. It's my opinion. I kind of can peep some people out. Might be wrong, but I think he just posing.
It looks like Marion Gaines of Fit and Fresh is in the background too. You see him? To the left of the guy with the shades on. All the way to the left. In the middle and then go to the left. That's the guy
Am I going to the left? Am I?
going to right there. The next one, a little bit over. Doesn't that look like Marion Gaines from Fresh and Fit?
Uh,
He does it to you?
I can see where you're getting that from, but
Okay.
no.
Okay.
He's this one. This guy here is black. He don't. I don't see no German, nothing. But yeah,
Okay.
I see
Oh,
what you're
so
saying.
Marion is German also? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. All right. Let's see here. All right. So next section is black men are failing at manhood and in mainstream life because of rogue black men and ghetto game. Could you tell me what rogue black men is? Because when I googled, it was like a clothing line.
There's a clothing line called Rope Black Men. But what I was referring to is men who do not want to conform to the standards of civil society. Although we're all individuals, there are standards of civility that we must display and behave in a way so that we can all get along and respect each other. So you have, in my view, rogue men who want to be defiant of everything civil, and they cause a lot of problems for people who act civil and who want a civil society that is safe, productive, and good.
Okay. So now these um, rogue men, they are purposely causing havoc. Is that what you're saying?
Well, well, some of them are proactively and purposely causing havoc because that's the value system that they have. Some of them are, they're not leaving that behavior, they're not changing that behavior, they're deciding that they want to live that kind of life, thug life, criminal life, life of violence, life of crime. We've invested a lot in schools. We want to encourage our young boys and young men to be learned, to learn, to be educated, to get skill sets in a variety of areas. But you have a segment of people, a small segment of people who are completely defiant of that. And what we have to be careful about is being apologists for their behavior. There are some people that, you know, want to be violent, want to be disruptive. And then you have people who are really working toward helping them who get discouraged. You have a lot of teachers who have gone, especially a lot of black teachers who have gone and they have this mission to help and educate black students, and their hearts are broken every year when they are trying to do the right thing, and because of the bad kids, the difficulty of the administration and teaching, we have a lot of talented people that leave teaching every year.
Well, I'm going to add a little bit to that because their wages are low. They're forced to, let me see, how can I say it? They are forced to make a dollar out of 15 cents
Mhm.
because if your children are not at the level that they're supposed to be, then you're affected by that, your raise and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes the teachers, they will fudge the numbers.
Mhm.
And I understand that, not saying I agree with it, but I do understand because if I went to school and I have a student loan and I'm trying to teach and you're saying make a dollar out of 15 cents and I know there's no way I could do that, what do you want me to do? And then more than likely, my colleagues, because they're in the same situation, they may encourage just, move the decimal point over a little bit. And so there are, lots of reasons why they, leave there. But I just wanted to throw that in there because we have talked about that before. Low wages will get you.
Yeah. It's better than a lot of areas because I know in certain states the retirement and health benefits are good for the people that can endure it. Like people coming out of a lot of the prosperous states, their teachers' pensions plans are very solid. The issue, as you said, in expensive areas, Philly, Chicago, when they really had a calling to teach, it's gotten so crazy that they don't want to take that risk, especially when they can work in a variety of areas and make more money. You're correct on that.
I remember specifically here in Chicago in 2003. Let's see, 2003. Yes, it was the year 2003. And they were asking for teachers and they were going to pay for the schooling. And I ran into one of my old coworkers and he was going to go into teaching. I know he was a pretty good artist. Sometimes their heads were a little bit too big. And I would tell them too because I'm the person, I don't like to see the person with tissue dragging the feet and people are, laughing at him. Just tell the guy, hey, you got tissue under your shoe. So he used to draw, which he was, like I said, he draws pretty well, but the heads were too big. So I would tell him, hey, the head is just a little bit too big, unless you're just trying to make a caricature. So um, we kept in touch a little bit, and then he was going for teaching. But I remember specifically 2013. I'm sorry, 2003. They had opened up where they were going to give grants for people to go to school and to be a teacher, and they did that. But 2 years later, 2005, they did a layoff, and I was so confused. I'm like, but wait a minute, you just paid for teachers for them to go to school, and of course they couldn't get all their credentials in those 2 years, and actually it wasn't even a complete 2 years because it was June 2003. And
Okay.
I'm like, what's going on? So hey, that's I remember that. Just wanted to share that with people. All right, let me go back and let me speak. Greetings, everyone that I missed in the chat room. I'm trying to keep the conversation going without looking in the chat. But hey, Jessica, thank you always for tuning in. I appreciate it. Okay, let's see. Back to the screen. Boop. Oop, wrong screen. Okay, there we are. There seems to be a new pastime on YouTube glorifying badass mother fathers in the form of rogue black men selling the virtues of ghetto game. Okay, could you describe what ghetto game is?
I would describe it as any type of way of looking at illegal activity, looking at dishonest activity to make money and to take advantage of people. So it's kind of like some might maybe call it hood game. I just refer to it as ghetto game. I think I've heard that before. You know how some of the guys are talking about how to have game to talk to women? Well, there's a culture, a thug-like culture of ghetto game where people who are, trafficking black young ladies, they're selling illegal narcotics, they're carjacking people, they're stealing and burglarizing homes, and they're just making poor black communities, some in many poor black communities, a hellish place to live in.
So all of that is under the ghetto game.
I'm putting it under that based on the discussion that we're having, but I would say
Hmm.
Ghetto Game is promoting it. If you notice that right now on YouTube, you have people who have been incarcerated and they're former pimps on YouTube talking about how to get over on
Hmm.
primarily black women. You have one guy on YouTube who just got arrested for trafficking 17-year-old black girls on Craigslist.
Now,
You have
how
another
old?
guy who's a flamboyant zoot suit wearing, loud color wearing pimp. I think he may be in your city who spent time in jail and spent time in prison, who talks about exploiting black women. And so all of that is the ghetto game culture. You do have a few stations of
Oh,
some guys that did some hard time. Then they call it. They talk about how hard their experiences were locked up, and hopefully some of the kids will listen to that and make a different decision. And then you have people like George Macon, who was formerly incarcerated and formerly did some really bad stuff. But now with Urban Nerds, he's trying to turn the corner and encourage young black kids to get into STEM fields. So that's one person going against the grain on that.
let me read a little bit more. Many of these miscreants are formerly incarcerated, convicted felons who in previous lives were pimps who trafficked black women in the sex trade. Now, what year was this? Because I know this was in the 70s, but as far as the term sex trade, um, are you saying OnlyFans or what are you
Now, I'm
saying?
talking about right now on Eros. I'm talking about right now on social media. They are trafficking, well, because that's what the legal terms are, sex trafficking. They are prostituting, got locked up for trafficking young black girls as young as 17. Yeah.
Well, I will say that I'm sure there are a few left out there, but as far as being a large group of people doing this, most women work on their own now. So that's
Okay.
why I was wondering, when you said sex trade, I'm like, are you talking about another country? But okay,
Now
gotcha.
here, this
All
guy
right.
in Chicago, even you remember when that woman, I think she was in Houston and she was an OnlyFans model and she got killed by one of her so-called fans who went crazy. It was a
Mm-hmm.
murder suicide. One of the guys who's a pimp in the Midwest said that that's why women should have pimps so that nobody would come up on and shoot on them.
Oh, I would have a bodyguard if I had that type of life. I need some
Yeah.
assistance. Not a pimp assistant because I need to put that on my taxes because I don't have a pension and I need to make me some money. It's enough money for everybody. So,
Well, Shar, I thought that you were working on the sugar babe thing. I heard you were going to get you a wealthy, high value man, and you would not have to worry about anything to do with a pension. Is this still the game plan?
it's not, but I'm kind of desperate at this point, so I have to get out there and do something.
Don't let them know that. Just play it cool. It's a lot of guys out here with money, and they will hook you up. They'll pay for what you want to get paid for and take care of you.
I'm tell you a secret. Don't tell nobody, okay?
Okay, I'll keep it between us.
Okay, I have a secret crush on Big J Triple X. Shh, don't tell nobody. I
Okay,
gotta I
okay.
gotta find out if he got a pension. I think he does. We'll find out. Don't tell nobody.
I won't tell anybody.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I'll continue reading here. Others among these reprobates were illegal narcotic dealers that sold heroin, crack cocaine, and meth for ghetto rich trinkets and ruined the lives of vulnerable black citizens. Okay, now what is ghetto rich trinkets?
You know, flashy cars, gaudy, gold chains, gold teeth, whatever they're living, because see, they're not really prosperous or wealthy. They're what we call hood rich. So what they have
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of cash flow and they're living in really bad areas, but they're living in a poor area driving a souped up Mercedes or a souped up BMW, and that's ghetto rich trinkets. Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I was guessing gold chains. I'm like, let me ask. And but okay, all right. Let me see this. What else we got here? Um, okay, and others among these transgressors were thieves, robbers, and carjackers that stole property from hardworking black strivers. And bringing up the rear are the low lives who were a constant violent threat against law-abiding citizens in black neighborhoods. And these, how you pronounce this, ne'er-do-wellers?
Neil near to was you got that right. Mm-hmm.
who are completing gangsta finishing school at state penitentiary were joined social media to lecture others about what alleged true manhood is. All right, now what is gangsta finishing school?
Well, usually when people get incarcerated, they come out a little bit harder. So they feel like if they've been incarcerated, they are more real, they're more, they're tougher, that they can allegedly, they've been through a lot. Now, most people probably would never want to spend any time in the prison. And I'm sure that a lot of these people who've come out or come from are shell shocked or dealing with post traumatic stress disorder and all those types of things. But the issue is that they really need to try to find a way to get their lives together. When I talked about how they ruined the lives of hardworking strivers, there's a couple in Baltimore called the Charm City Buyers. They have been rehabbing and developing town row houses in Baltimore. They just got a contract with the state to build $15 million worth of low income, high quality housing. And one of the biggest threats for moving back is the violence. A lot of people, got sense, we want to have safe spaces, but when you're trying to build these nice places and you have all of this carjacking, all of this violence against people, and it's just that's one of the hardest things that they're coming for. So this couple is really striving. They're out there. They're teaching others how to rehab and rebuild. They'll take those row houses and build them up. But you got that constant threat of people who don't want to get with the program. The people, I guess, who would be the image of the type of people that were in The Wire doing all kind of craziness. And that was based on, I think that was based on Baltimore as well, or maybe even filmed there. So that's what I meant by that.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to ask because as far as with the wire, there were is it was obvious that a lot of those people didn't have a lot of choices. So, um, but let me say this. Oh Lord, it's an emergency! Everybody
That's
run!
an Amber Alert.
Oh, okay.
I
Whew,
knocked that out.
I'm about to run. Okay, all right. um, a lot of people didn't have a lot of options because, um, as you mentioned here with the state penitentiary, state penitentiary, they have joined social media to lecture about what alleged true manhood is. Now, when you mention George Macon, that isn't his case, so they did learn something in the state penitentiary. So not everyone that done their time come out the same. Some, come out they want to do something better or different. Because even they had a character in The Wire, the same thing. He didn't want to do all of that. So they're not, not everyone goes in and come out the same. So,
Between
there's
80
some hope.
and 90%, go back into the street life, crime life. The rare people like George Macon are the exception to the rule. And also, we don't want our young men to experience prison before they
Okay.
start learning to read, before they are thinking about what life means, that they want to do the right thing with their lives. That's not where we want them. We want them to learn that in schools, with competent teachers, maybe at community centers with competent social workers, ideally with loving and caring mothers and fathers who are active in their lives to guide them in the right direction. But it's heartbreaking when you hear about these people who have basically ruined their lives. They're in some really dangerous prison and just getting out would be, and then the society has changed. And we see the society becoming more conservative. One of the things that does concern me with the current president, he was the one that signed that big crime bill. So he's already done the Asian hate crime. What's going to happen as it looks like he may lose the House and Senate in 2022. So to save his presidency for his reelection, if he decides to, and it looks like he may, but he's going to have to sign some get tough measure the way Bill Clinton went against welfare reform right when he
Mm-hmm.
needed to get reelected. So don't be surprised if there's going to be a harsh anti-crime bill coming out that's going to disproportionately um, impact Black men and Latino men and lock up a lot of people again from a Democratic president who is more concerned about saving himself rather than investing in the young men and young women to give them a better option of life. And I do want to say something and kindly push back because I do respect you, Shar. When we say that people didn't have options, the option is that you've got to make the choices to not get into criminality. Let's say you don't have some people go into the military. The less preparation and education that a person has, that means they may have to start at the bottom. There are a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
you might have to be pouring concrete, learning how to be the best concrete pourer, then you get your own concrete truck, and over time become, financially independent pouring and laying concrete. You may have to do a variety of tough things like a lot of these Latino immigrants that come over here and do, because unfortunately you were born into a situation and raised in a situation of great neglect by parents, great abandonment by the village, and you're just out there on your own. But turning to crime, um, and most poor people do not commit crimes. Most poor people are not criminals, and in fact, most of the world is poor. So we don't accept criminality or poverty as a justification for criminality, and the choices have to be respect other people's property, respect their lives, and find ways to contribute productively. And you may have to start at the bottom. If you don't have the skill of a Russell Wilson to be a pro quarterback or of a LeBron James to be a basketball player, selling crack cocaine, selling heroin, selling meth, uh, partnering with people who are basically out to destroy our communities is not a wise thing to do. But if you're in construction and you start a towing business or you learn any variety of skills that you can learn with your hands and you are really good at it, you can build up. So I think that people saying that this is the only way to go, it's interesting that they can get access to distribute cocaine, but they can't get access to clean water, organic foods, healthcare, education. And I think that the people that look at that have to come to terms with that. Why are you able to get access to things that are brought into the community illegally, but you can't get the basic things that you need that for productive development as a human being?
Can I
And
raise
that's
my
what,
hand now? I want to raise
yes,
my hand and answer that question.
got you,
Teacher,
got you.
teacher,
Yes,
I want to
okay.
answer. Okay, so the drugs are right there because there are a lot of people that are on them. They self medicate, that's recreation, whatever they do. And so it's there. So it is easy to get that. It's just right there. They're going to need some people to be a lookout or maybe drive somewhere to pick it up, to drop it off. So there's a opportunity, regardless of what you may consider that is, but that's an opportunity to make some money. And I loved all the things that you mentioned, pouring concrete and all that, but we're going to have to start at a child or a boy being 14 years old because this is when he's, becoming of age. High school is right there, and things are tough, and his stomach is growling. So, what is his option? Where does he go?
Well, as a 14-year-old, I want him to be in school, being prepared for academic excellence. If he has to go to an after-school program like the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, to get a hot meal, to get a take-home meal. And if he's in a dangerous community, we need to find social services, churches that will help him get into a safer community. If his mother is going through some challenges, if his father is going through some challenges, we need to get them out of those communities because that's what he's going. Because the only option, or the most likely option, of selling illegal narcotics, getting into criminality, is death in early life, well, death at an early age, and a long prison sentence. And our kids deserve better than that. We don't want to see young women crying about their sons being locked up for 25, 30 years, or getting shot down in the streets. And you're seeing that a lot. And so I hear you. Most of us didn't grow up in prosperous communities. Most of us grew up in working class, what we call working class, lower middle class backgrounds. And some of us got a moral code through our faith community, through our parents, through uncles, aunts, different people in our lives. But the people who do not want to respect civil society, who feel like they want to put our black police officers at risk unnecessarily, who want to ruin the lives of people. There was a young lady in Chicago, and I don't necessarily
Hmm.
know how to, but it touched my heart. She was studying for the ACT. I think her name is Hidea Pimpleton. Is that her name? Shaw, you know what I'm talking about?
That sounds a little familiar.
Yeah, she was not even doing anything. She was at home. She was studying for the ACT, wanting to go to college, and a straight bullet came through, and they traced this to this guy. This guy's locked up for 40 years. So her life is taken and his life is taken. So we've got to come to terms with the fact that causing more damage is not going to work for us. There's a part of the Hippocratic Oath that says, first, do no harm. So at first, if I'm not harming myself, if I'm not harming others, that's the first thing. And then I've got to find legitimate ways, even as a poor person, to take care of myself without harming someone else. And that may mean
Okay.
starting at the bottom. That may mean going to a grocery store and saying, hey, sir, I'm here. Can I sack bags? Then you build up from that. You may not be able to go to Johns Hopkins University if you can't do calculus, you can't do organic chemistry, but it's possible that you could get some skill sets and over a long period of time become a chemist, maybe become a doctor. But to give people free reign to harm other people because they're poor and because they're without is not justified.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Ray, I can see the 14-year-old boy, and I can see he has a sister, and he has a mom that's struggling, and the dad is around, but they kind of fight. Mom and dad don't get along, because why? They don't have much money, and that can cause some problems when it comes down to, you know, relationship. So with that going on, and the stomach is growling, because dad took that light bill and he tried to flip it. It didn't work out. Mom's upset and she's concerned, so she can't rest. And she gets on him and say a few, things to him. He didn't like it. He might have pushed her and went on out the door. So he's gone. The money's gone, and the daughter and son they're still there hungry. So um, is it the young man and his sister responsibility of telling mom, well, mom, there are social services you can go to and you can go here. I mean, if you don't have that information, it's not like it's you have the information. So that's not always going to be an answer. And then two, it's just a lot of red tape too, because
Mhm.
it's just not, I'm just saying the 14-year-old boy, but let's be honest, is that 14-year-old boy time hundreds.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of people. Now I'll give you a story because it looks like that I'm a criminal too.
Okay.
I guess I don't have any
You don't have to
laws.
confess all of it, Char. Just keep
Oh, you
keep
know what?
yourself
I
safe.
am.
We don't want all of it.
I
People to
don't
hear
think they'll
all of it.
come get me because
Yeah.
this happened like 30 some years ago. I think I'm safe, but
Okay.
maybe not. I don't know. But let's see what happens. You all will be a witness if there's no show next Friday. But I may be a criminal, like I said, because reading this, there was no morality. My parents told me about church and everything, but um, I wanted more than what we had. My dad, I was 12 years old. My dad company, which he was in, what is that, manufacturing, they left. Job's gone. And it taken a little bit less than 2 years of all the money he had. So that's the savings, the money he had for me for college, for what else? Unemployment, whatever other benefit they gave him, gone. You used it up, and I'm 14 years old. So we moved from that nice, beautiful two-bedroom apartment to a one-room place. That's where we had to go. And it was tough times. It was some tough times. So um, I say that, and I got I got lots of stories, because I've seen it. I know people, and I've even had some situations. But so I'm going back to when I was 14, and we moved into this room. One room, two adults and a 14-year-old. One room. And my dad actually had an opportunity to sell drugs. And I'll tell you how I know. Because his friend also lost his job, but he had 4 children. His wife worked, but that wasn't enough to keep the 2 cars they owned, the home that they owned. I think they had 3-bedroom home. Their 3-bedroom home, and their children were teenage. They were a little older than me. So the dad, he decided to say, "Hey, this is an opportunity. I'm gonna go ahead and sell these drugs. This is available to me." Both my father, and my dad's friend, they were from the South, so they didn't have a high school education. So, well, there you go with that. Lack of education. Back in 1980, yeah, about 1980,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't no program for 30-some-year-old men to go to school and make money and pay for housing and all those things that they need. It just didn't exist. So anyway, my dad chose not to, and my dad's friend chose to sell drugs. And he was able to feed his family for a little while until, of course, he got caught because he's older. He's not able to run. So they wasn't going to put him on the corner. They're going to have him to transport. Since he had a nice car he was using, and I do say the car he was using because by him losing his job, his car note was behind. His wife's car note wasn't behind at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was on borrowed time, and he ended up losing the car, and then he's using his wife's car. So he ended up being picked up, and he did 8 years for cocaine.
Oh, wow.
8 years, because that was the drug back in 1980 or 1979. So he did exactly 8 years because the last time I seen him, I was 12. The next time I seen him, I was 20 years old.
Mm.
Very interesting. He ended up coming to live with us. Wasn't that interesting? 8 years later, he ended up living with us. Came to his friend, needed some help. Slept on the floor because we didn't have an extra bedroom or anything. But, that was life. But I say that to say, when things happen and the choices that are before us, we choose what we can get at the time. I'm sure there's waiting lists and all of that. But sometimes, when your stomach sounds like this, morality is, it's way back in the back of the mind, So
Okay.
I'm sure those 4 children he had, it was important he tried to help feed them, keep the house, keep the cars, whatever. So that was his choice, regardless. And then my daddy had the choice that he made, and it was really tough. So I'm gonna stop sharing a story. I'm gonna read a little bit more, and then I'll go into the next story because I got stories.
Okay,
You
great,
know,
great
I've
input.
experienced everything: middle class, po, poor, and I think right now I guess I'm back at poor right now. So I've experienced everything in 50 years. I tell you. All right, let me see. Where did we leave out? Okay, right here. Rogue black men and badass mother fathers have nothing to offer the black community. Nothing? I don't know. The hard fact of the matter is that we don't need badass mother fathers, ghetto game, or rogue black men to advance ourselves as diverse black communities. So this means you don't need them as in they can't help to advance black communities? Is that what this line means?
Well, if they're participating in illegal activities, bringing heat and attention from the police to black communities, making those communities unsafe for law-abiding citizens, then the only way they can help us is by stop doing those types of things and
Hmm.
advising other people who have participated in those types of activities that that's not the way to go. So
Okay.
they are valued as human beings. They are brothers and sisters, but there are brothers and sisters who are harming us. And what happens is that their way of looking at life, and I do respect the fact that times can be hard and people have to make decisions, but I question whether most of the people who are participating in these types of activities were in a situation like your friend. There are some people that are criminal minded, they're sociopaths, they don't respect authority, they don't respect civility, and those would be the people who are proactively, they don't want to go to college. They don't want
Pre
to go to the military. They want to make quick, fast, easy money any way they can. And that's the type of people that in this article I'm targeting.
Okay. And then the next sentence is the real deal is that rogue black men are a hindrance and burden to the black community. Their philandering and rampant sexual I know what it is. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
I know what
ha-
you're saying.
has helped to produce 72% out of wedlock birth rate and fatherless homes where their children are underperforming in all the important areas of life, such as academics, employment, and parenting. Let me see. Now, what is the introduction of the sexual promiscuity? What is that all about?
Well, when you don't have any reverence for life, you don't have reverence for authority, you don't respect civility. So instead of connecting with one woman, even if you don't have a quote legal marriage on paper, you can be committed to her, you can respect her, you can have that woman and build a life with her. But when you have, go
Um,
ahead.
okay, I got to interject there
Okay.
because I've seen men of all statures, all kind of guys, and sometimes they just want to have more than one at times. Sometimes they're just dating, and that's what happens. So I don't know if this has anything to do with morals, because the testosterone is a hell of a drug. That's just the bottom line on that. But yeah, but
Well,
okay, that's your
I hear
opinion. I
you on
thank
that.
you. I
Okay,
thank
I
you
hear you.
for it.
Will you finish making your point on that?
The 72%, that is a hell of a number there out of wedlock. Well, if I don't have much money, then more than likely we're not going to get married. And I'm not waiting to get married to have sex. So this can happen. This is normal.
Mhm.
I don't think this has anything to do with anything else, but you can give me some insight.
Well, if you're a marginal man, you're not productive to yourself. You have not mastered the labor market legally. You may or may not have high level skill sets. then you're not the person that should be out there trying to sex up a lot of women. You really need to get yourself together before approaching any women. And the women who they deal with tend to be at their level. They're not the women who are at Spelman getting a degree in chemistry and then going to Duke Medical School. They're not the women that may be, at was Accenture with a tech degree or a nursing degree at a Northwestern hospital. But what happens is that those two people concentrated in poverty with the lack of education and a lot of time are recycling poverty, even if they're not malicious about it. And they're the people that need to practice self-control. They're the people that really need to have, because their children, they don't necessarily have the wherewithal to give their children what they need to succeed in life. And
Mhm.
succeeding in life would mean not doing those things, to be productive to oneself, not to participate in criminality, hopefully to graduate from high school to be able to read, write, compute, and get a job or career to take care of oneself. And if you're going to be a mother or father, have the wherewithal and skills to take care of children well and give them a good life. So, although promiscuity will go across class lines, the results of it are less damaging for well educated upper middle class people and upper class people and solidly middle class people. The real problems are really for the lower middle class, the lower strata, who just don't have the basic skills and income and education to overcome those challenges. So if a person is an engineer and he's making 80, maybe 200,000 a year. He has a condo, he's taking care of himself. His girlfriend, who's a nurse, if she happens to get pregnant out of wedlock and they live together, they're going to be upper middle class couple who can provide a private school education for their children and a good life. But a poor guy and a poor girl who may have gone to a bad high school, may or may not have graduated, if they have a child or children, their children are going to have a really great challenge to become solidly middle class. And that's all. And that's not, hopefully, not a moral judgment, but it's just the facts of what's happening. And we have that
Mhm.
high out of wedlock birth rate from that class very strongly, although out of wedlock birth rate goes toward all classes. For women who are college educated, out of wedlock birth rate is less than 10%. So the more education a woman has, the less likely she's going to have children out of wedlock.
Mm. Okay. Well, I'm not familiar with any of that. I end up with associates. I don't have any children out of wedlock. I just never got pregnant, but I was, very horny. So I should have been pregnant. Chances are, you have sex 2, 3 times a day for years. Hey, shouldn't there be a baby? But it wasn't. So we know that's not going to be for all, right?
Uh, were you particularly responsible in your sexual activities, do you feel? Were you practicing safe sex and
We
practicing
were. We
responsible
do. We
sexuality
did.
as far as birth control?
We did.
Okay,
But sometimes, he wanted to be tricky. But yeah, we did. We
okay.
do. Or we
And that's
have.
part of the reason that you had the wherewithal to do that. However, other people who just may not have the understanding of how to do that, and they have children and they don't have the understanding, even with teachers who really love teachers who may have a mission to go to certain inner city or certain at-risk schools and teach and show love on them, the brokenness of the family, the brokenness of the village is very hard to overcome. And so those are the types of things that, but you made it through, Shar, some kind of way. Throughout all of that, you were able to find a way to be sexually responsible, and I get pregnant. And I don't think it was as much of an accident. I think it more than likely was proactive, that you took the type of precautions that you needed to, and other people may not have the wherewithal to do that.
Mm, could be. But it is interesting that you mentioned that some people don't have the understanding. So let's reach back because what are we going to do, or what is advised for those who don't have presently don't have the information, education, or better opportunities to do better? What I mean, what do we do with these people?
That's a very solid question. And I'll partially answer it as we're going into it, because we'll get into another subject.
Okay.
Eugene Robinson wrote a book, 11 years ago, called Disintegration, The Splintering of Black America. The people that you are describing who are don't have the wherewithal are called the abandoned class. The society has basically abandoned them. Everybody else is looking out for self. People who are middle class are busy taking care of their own needs. The celebrities who are the elite, they're taking care of their own needs. And so basically, that group has been abandoned. And my concern is that that particular group is not able to read the tea leaves of what's happening.
Mm,
Gentrification is happening. Mass immigration of a lot of groups to displace them has happened. So for you got immigrants coming from Latin America doing a lot of the low tier labor. They've got people from India and different parts of Asia doing some of the high IT, technology, healthcare type work. And this abandoned class, which has a difficulty of getting an education, is really in a bad situation right now. And that's why their leadership has to be conscientious to educate them not to harm themselves. The society is becoming, as Antonio Moore is saying, the wealth is being calcified. So if you're not born in the middle class, it's going to be hard to get to that. And then there's going to be possibly a very harsh sentencing again for people that commit criminality. That's why I'm saying Joe Biden, it always comes from a Democrat. It doesn't come from Republicans. To save his presidency, he's going to have to put a harsh conservative crime bill, because he's already looked at soft on crime, he's looked at soft on immigration, and those people are very self serving. So remember how Hillary Clinton called black and Latino young men super predators? They're going to come out with something, because their game is to just win elections, keep their elite lifestyle in their isolated communities, and then the people on the bottom fight for what they can. So that's what has happened. And that's why when I hear people apologizing, telling these young kids, hey, go do this, that, and the other, you don't have that luxury. Just like you were very wise and very responsible in your behavior, because in many ways, you're probably where you are, but I would bet you're more middle class than you allow yourself to say, but you're probably where you are because of your responsible behavior, even throughout those challenges. Because a lot of people were tempted to do things that wouldn't help them, uh, were tempted to get in things, say, you know what, I just don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with a prison sentence. I don't want to deal with a prison. A lot of women like yourself say, I'm just not, I don't want to deal with kids right now. I don't have the type of relationship I want. I'd rather be by myself and try to make it the best I can, rather than to be going through the challenges of trying to raise children when I may not have the resources, the temperament, the assistance from the father that I need to give this child or children good lives.
well, I'm gonna tell you, Ray. It sounds good on paper, but it just so happened my womb just didn't. The sperm didn't hit it, so that's good. That worked out for me. That was my what I was trying to do, but it could have happened,
Mhm.
and I could be in a situation, we don't know if the future, if me and the father would have continued to be okay, got married, and all of those things. But, um, there's things happen. And I do say day to day because we can have a goal, but it's hard to reach it sometimes because we have a challenge we got to get past today to get to tomorrow, and then that day come, oh, we got to get through this day. So there's a lot of decisions being made daily, and we don't know all what they will be. Now with the children, the 72% out of wedlock birth rate that's written here, those children have fathers. Their fathers, as you mentioned here, are having some situations. But I, in my opinion, not all those children had a terrible life. There may have been a grandmother that was able to help them. Um, they could have been just really skilled in school and was able to excel. So, there are some people that can make it. But when you're poor, it is really tough. And that's something I'm going to bring up on this next couple of sentences here. It says their image as angry and violent black men brings undue surveillance and intolerant policing of law abiding black men. Now, I truly disagree with this because I've seen you just black, you be pulled over. You don't have to be angry. The image of the angry, if you're talking about maybe past or television of all that, there can be a new cadet. I don't even know if they call them cadet, but let's say we have a new white police officer, 21 years old. I don't I don't see where he's thinking of a black image when he does the wrong thing, when he pulls that person over, that black face over. I don't see that. But people of color are just being pulled over. So that's just my opinion on that. I just don't see it being anything else. It's just black men up, let's pull you over. Now just think, the police started off as rounding up the black people. That was the whole purpose of them forming police, to make sure these folks got their papers. Where you going, slave? Who you belong to? Where you going? So I don't know. That's a little pushing it right there. And then the next sentence says their choice to proactively participate in criminal enterprises has caused the society at large to invest more money in incarcerating black men rather than investing in the education of promising black boys. Now, there's a couple of things I'm really wondering about this sentence. The criminal enterprise, the word enterprise sound like this is a really big thing. And as far as investing, are you saying that if the person, let's say 10 guys, instead of them selling drugs on the corner because that was available to them at the time when they were 15, because they couldn't get a job, um, they had to be 16, because I know that has happened here. You need a permit if you're 15, but 16 you can actually work. But you're hungry, you got things going on in your home, you need a job now. If I watch out, make sure nobody's coming, the police coming, I get $20 a day, that helps me out, I'm going to choose that. So that money isn't taxed. So I don't see how that money was going to be invested anyway in promising black boys.
Now, were you finished making your point on that?
Yes, could you expound? Yes.
Now, when I use the term investing, I'm talking about the state and cities and counties. When we have a state budget, a city budget, it's primarily a state budget. So
Mhm.
if it costs us $40,000 a year to have someone incarcerated, that impacts the amount of money that we would have to invest in the education of children. So if I only have what 8,000 to invest in the education of elementary school students, high school students, etc., when I could do a better job with 15,000, but I can't access that 15,000 because of the high rate of criminality that we gotta keep people locked up who are uncivil, who do not want to respect the civil society. That's on the one point. That's what I was meaning on that. And so, as Frederick Douglass said, it is easier to raise productive children, productive boys, than to rehabilitate broken men. And I also wanted to go back to that point that you were making about the undue surveillance and intolerance policing. What I
Hmm.
meant by the term the image. So when police officers are trained, they are usually looking at a worst case scenario. Yes, you might be an MD driving a nice car and you may get pulled over. But if your behavior is in order and you respect that police officer for the most part, not 100% of the time, then pretty much you'll more than likely get past that. But if you're black, and that's different for whites, because you have a society where white privilege is real. So a white guy may be able to curse a police officer, talk about all the rights he has. You don't have those privileges as a black person. So if you're stopped and you happen to have a suspended license, you happen to have some weed or some cocaine just on there, you were stressed out. All of that adds up to an arrest. And you don't have the luxury, you don't have the financial or the political. So if you talk about an upper middle class white kid from the suburbs, or even an upper middle class black kid from the suburb whose father is a dentist who can hire a lawyer, they're going to get off of that. So if you're talking about a poor black kid who drives a car with a suspended license, who has some cocaine or opium in the car, that is going to be a pipeline to the jailhouse because he's not going to be able to afford a maybe a highly competent attorney. He's more than likely going to get an overworked public defender who doesn't even have time to see the case except the day he shows up to court. And so it's going to be like a treadmill. So that's why people in that situation have to be more careful. When you are not the person in a position of power and privilege, you can't walk around acting like people in positions of power and privilege. So you would have to avoid, you would want to be under the radar. So if you're driving, you're going to be squeaky clean. So you're going to have things can, it's not always the case, but we want to bring less probability of police abuse, police brutality, and the deaths of young black men. But we got to teach them to say, hey, man, just be cautious at this. Don't curse him out. Don't get into any fights. Don't provoke him because he's got a gun and he could kill you and he's going to write the report. So the point of the matter is that when we tell these kids that you can act any kind of way, and there has been racism, and it is a racist society. However, you're not changing that by committing violations and criminality, by getting violent with someone who may not understand how to do his job. He may have been trained. He might be a rookie officer. He is more than likely frightened not by the image of a good kid, but by a violent thug who will kill him if he's black or white because he wants to make it big in the drug game. That's the image that he's thinking about to save his life. That's what they're trained. They're not trained on the base. They're trained on the best case scenario, but they're cautious because some bullshit could go down really quick, and that officer could lose his life in just an instant. And so
Mm.
that's where we're coming from. I hear and respect what you're saying. What I'm saying is that we're not in position to act a fool. We're not in position, as our young boys are not in position to act crazy with law enforcement officers.
Oh, well, I understand what you just said, but I know you just walking why black can be a problem. So, um, thank you for that. And I want to acknowledge Nick Taylor. He says, at an early age, I refused to allow the poverty mindset to permeate my thought process and become a part of my lexicon life. In the working world, the gives get actually works out. Thank you so much for your support, Nick. And you have made Sheed sing. So, Sheed, you know what to do. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. Let's see. And then I want to point out. Do, 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 do. Let me see. Where are we here? Where's my screen? Oh, there we are. Okay, promising black boys. Okay, so you mentioned about investing in education. Are you speaking something private? Because I don't know of any states that have a budget for promising black boys or anything like that. Are you meaning something, like a I don't know, private money?
I'm talking about public education. There's only so much that's in the pot for education, for all the total budget for the state. There's so much in the county budget. There's so much that goes to school systems and taxes. And if you have to take $40,000 a year to incarcerate someone, that takes away from the money that you can invest in children's education. And
Oh,
so
that's
if we
what you're
have
meaning.
fewer
Okay.
people committing crimes, getting locked up, then we have fewer people to invest that $40,000 in, and more can be invested in young kids as they're to keep them from getting into criminality because they'll get the skills that they need to be productive citizens.
Okay. Well, I will. Yeah, I'll disagree with that because prisons are mostly private anyway, so they want people in them. And then, two, if the young black boys are having issues before they can finish school, then they weren't going to be there anyway. But okay, thank you.
Say that last part again for me, sure. I apologize. I didn't hear what you said. They weren't going to do what with school?
Oh, I said if they're having problems anyway, they're not going to be able to finish school. So they wouldn't be in the school. So it wouldn't work out regardless, is what I'm saying.
Okay. What my goal would be if we didn't have to invest the $40,000 to lock someone up, we could have full-time teachers with teaching assistants. We could have after-school programs with social workers. It would take a lot of money, and they deserve that because if these children are coming from broken homes or abandoned communities, the type of investment they need is very strong. They'd be going from school from like 8 to 3, and then going after school, maybe 4 o'clock to 6. And then we'd have to invest in them to help them overcome the deficits they have in their lives. But getting people to put that type of money into children when you have an image of a criminal, a thug, a violent, angry person is very difficult when it costs so much, and then politicians are reelected by being tough on crime. So if they're
Hmm.
soft on crime, they'll lose elections. You'll get more conservative right wingers in there, and they'll put those conservative right wing bills. They'll cut down on education investing, and they'll build prisons. And I'm not certain, but if you'll get that information for me, the percentage of private prisons versus the amount of state prisons. Most prisons are state run, but I know that there are private prisons, but I'm not certain of the percentage of prisons that are private in the US.
Okay, maybe we'll do that a little later. Um, I wanted to next point out something. Let's see, what was it? Oh, I was going to tell you about my criminality because, yeah, I was, a criminal. I didn't pay taxes. I was 14 and I had to figure out a way, and I did figure out a way to make some money. And so what I did, I sold candy,
Hmm.
and I didn't pay any taxes or anything. I just went to the store, bought some candy, and you know what? I even took the box that the candy came in. I would, take out the candy because I didn't buy a whole lot at one time. I would buy like $10 worth,
Hmm.
and I would take the box, and take that to the register and buy like 20 bars of candy,
Hmm.
hoping they wouldn't say anything about the box. I'm like, no, I want that box. I want that. because I was using that. So when they see me in the halls at school, they like, they go to Candy Lady. And I sold the candy, and I didn't pay any taxes. I didn't. So and then I moved up in the world. The next thing I did taffy apples. When the store had the taffy apples on sale, 2 or 3, $4, I loaded up with what I had, and I would take those to school, and I sold those too. Paid no taxes, none. And I'm not done. No, I'm not
Okay.
done. I moved on, and I also sold soda pop, soda, cans of soda. I even had special customers. I knew who my great people were, my cola. I had to do what I had to do. But, when I did that, my criminal life, I didn't have to ask my parents for any money in my sophomore, junior, or senior year. I was able to pay my way to and from school on a bus. And then in my senior year, when I worked a part time job, I was able to, pay that too. Um, my clothes, whatever fees I had, I was able to do all those things. And, I really wonder, I didn't think to ask, but I wonder how my parents thought about that I was, doing that. I never, I never asked them. It's too late now, but I kind of wonder, what did they think about their daughter doing that? They didn't have to give me anything. Who knows? But just threw that out there. But I didn't pay no
Well,
taxes, so I'm
well, Shar, you,
sorry.
you sounded like a very enterprising young woman in middle school and high school. Probably your gross sales were not enough to generate a tax revenue amount due. But what you showed that a person who is enterprising can buy products wholesale, legal products, sell them at a retail base. You mentioned that you got a part-time job and you were able to pay your different fees for activities. You were able to dress yourself for school. That's what you call an enterprising woman. And I'm surprised that you didn't go ahead and go to Spelman and then go to Northwestern and get that MBA, etc. But we're all good with it though. But you were doing the types of things that we're saying to do. And if you were found a way to do that with legal activities such as candy, getting a part-time job, staying in school, not not getting into bad things in school, you are more of an example of what I'm talking about that we need to be directed toward.
Well, I will say this was 1980. That is a different world. Also, I had both my parents. That was a different world. And also, I was a daddy's girl. So I was a problem solver. Watched my dad, he just solved problems. My mom was more emotional, and I didn't like that. So I'm like, what's next? What we got to do? Oh, that's broke? Okay, that need to be fixed, right? Okay, what we got to do next? So I just watched him to see, how things go. And I just mimicked him. But I did generate enough to pay taxes because it was, I think the law back then was $400. And I know that because when my dad played the racetrack, he had won $1,000. And I remember the form, anything over $400, you had to pay taxes. So that's why I said I'm a criminal. And I'm okay with that because there was a need. And I'm pretty sure if it was something simple for me to do with drugs, I would have sold that too if I needed to. But I'm just saying that people have different opportunities and some have none. Some is given to them like, look here, son, look here, daughter, you gonna go and do that. Well, mama, I don't know. You're gonna go do that. Our light due bill is due, and this whatever. We have all different types of parents, but I just did want to say that, and their parents may not know anything about morality because you mentioned certain things about um, I don't want to sound negative when I say kumbaya, but you really was had the sugar and spice and everything nice type of reality, and I know that isn't something that everyone is introduced to. So, and then if they were, that went out the window. They only went to church on Christmas and Easter. So, just saying.
Well, I'm seeing the Christmas, Mother's Day, and Easter. I go more than that, but I understand where you're coming from on that, Sean. I hear you.
I have one more thing to share, but I was going to let people on because I'm looking at the time,
Okay.
and I know I'll go maybe another hour and a half. I'll push it tonight. Um, Plus, I think I can afford to go ahead and drink me a little wine because I
Okay.
won't fall asleep. Because I'm telling you, it's been a it's been a rough week. It's been rough.
Now tell us about the wine that you're going to be drinking, Char. We want to know so we kind of enjoy it with you.
It's gonna be a red wine. I just remember the first word. I think is Castello,
Okay.
Casti, and I don't remember the rest. I think the letters Del is in there too. Del, Del, if I'm not mistaken. I have to
Okay.
look at the bottle, but I'm gonna enjoy.
Okay.
I'm gonna enjoy, but I'm gonna open up
Okay.
and see if anyone has any questions, and we will. Let me see. Where's the darn? I had the link here, and where are we? Then I can look at the chat, see if I missed anything, because I do want to welcome people. Welcome, Classic Ruby. How are you?
Why, good evening, Shar, and of course, good evening, Ray. I'm glad that you came up and are fully expanding on your thought process so we could understand in full. That was good.
Oh, thank you, Ruby. I'm glad to that I could do that. And how are you doing this evening as well?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. I gotta say, sir, I have a lot to say. I got a lot to
Okay.
say, not gonna lie. But obviously, I'm not gonna just bombard you with it all at once. That would be crazy of me. Ruby doesn't do anything like that ever. So no, but for real, I think that we clearly stand on two sides of this issue. And I think it'll be good to actually be able to ask you some questions to kind of get you to delve in a little deeper in some areas so we can see where are you getting some of this, because I think that's where I'm confused. Like I'm not sure where you're getting some of your information. So like when you say, for example, right, that it's the rogues and all the ghetto guys and whatever that are helping to produce a 72% out of wedlock birth rate in fatherless homes. um, I mean, it suggests first off that you're saying that the actual birth rate is 72% out of wedlock, and that not only that, but that it's a 72% single homes rate in the Black community, which it's not. And so I'm just wondering where you're actually getting that information. Let's start there.
Okay. Now, if you note, I said that they're helping to produce that 70% out of wedlock. They're contributors. Now, hopefully, most of the 72%, well, more than likely, most of the 72% out of wedlock birth rate are not by thugs, hoodlums, people like that, but they are making their contribution to that. And that's how I stated that. They have
No, I
helped.
get that, but what I'm asking is where are you getting the number 72%? That's actually really what I'm asking.
I believe that right now I'd have to look at black demographics to show the out of wedlock birth rate for the black community right now. So if you go to blackdemographics.com, and also I think that is still in the CDC, that's Center for Disease Control and the health statistics, vital statistics. So that's been about 70 to 72% for at least the last 20 years.
Well, I mean, on Black demographics in and of itself, it actually addresses this. I can share the link right now because I
Mhm.
thought you might say Black demographics. And so I went onto the website just to refresh my memory. And I'll put the link inside the chat, in the private chat here, so you can see what I'm referring to. But it says right here, actually, that, and to be fair, fine, we have a lower rate than all children, right? Whereas in all children, out of all children, 70% are born into two parent homes, whereas in for us, 42% of Black children are born into two parent homes,
Okay.
right? So then that would therefore suggest that 72% is significantly higher than the actual number,
Well,
right? Because
well,
we'd
when you're
actually,
saying two-parent homes, are you talking about married couples, or the two-parents home also include people who are living together without marriage, as far as the marriage license? That's how they're identifying that.
well, even if we were to do it by that way, then when we're looking at people who are married instead of cohabitating, we're still looking at a 38% rate, which would then give us a 62%, not 72%, out of wedlock birth rate. But again, that's still not 100% accurate to say because people choose to cohabitate or to not get legally married, but still to get religiously married and whatever, and that wouldn't actually count towards the demographics of marriage, even though religious marriage is still very important to people these days, and people are trying to avoid legal marriage to keep the state out of their marriages. So, when you're looking at it from the fact of just cohabitating or married, right, then you have a rate of 58%. Or you have a rate of 62%. So either way, it's just, I guess to me, it's overstated to say 72%. Like we just keep trying to push that number higher and higher and higher.
But some
Um,
cities do have that. You're saying that you're comparing the number of people who are married based to the number of children born to women who have not been married. And that would be showing, based on those stats, it would be based on women who have a marriage license. It would not be based on women who maybe live with the father of their child.
Right, but the actual link that I sent you was literally about children being born into either married two parent homes or
Mhm.
just two parent homes in general.
Okay. Now, I'm not okay. Now, the information has been standard by the CDC and the Center for Health Statistics for a good while. So, noting that, I'll be able to review that not immediately, but I'll be able to review that. And the point that you were making is,
The point that I'm making is, and I think that this is part of the issue, because even on Black demographics, which is a website you personally referred to,
mhm,
right, they say that there's a commonly repeated statistic regarding out of wedlock births at 70%.
okay,
Right? And it's a commonly repeated statistic, but it's actually not really giving the correct information. And my issue with that is that I think part of the issue for me is that we're repeating a lot of information that is like commonly held beliefs. And a lot of those commonly held beliefs are statistics or information that is either inflated or taken out of context. And then not only are we doing that, but then we are pinning it onto a particular demographic, for example, in this case, the hood, and saying, well, it's their fault, right? And so I
well,
guess that's my issue with it is if we're going to blame the hood for the numbers, we should at least get the numbers right before we decide whether or not it's the hood's
now
fault.
this stat that you have up here is not saying the number of out of wedlock birth rates. This is number of children living with their parents. So, which I said, it could show that you have children living
Scroll
with their
down a little
parents,
bit,
but that
Shar.
doesn't mean that they would be married to them.
Right. Scroll down to the next thingy because that actually is the one
Okay.
that shows you the marriage. So the first thing that they showed you was just in general parent kids being raised in two parent homes. Right? But then if you keep going down, it actually does show you
Okay.
the statistic there of yeah, that's the chart. Keep going down a little bit more.
hmm If you
And then
notice that on that Ruby, it does say it is a commonly repeated statistic regarding out of wedlock births, which only takes into account whether or not a woman was married at the time she gave birth, which is what I was saying. So
right,
it's
but
not
hold on.
disputing
But
that.
wait
It's
a
not.
second. Just Shar, if
hmm
you could scroll down a little bit more, yeah. Um, so there we go. So this one right here, and you can see that this statistic, 38%, that
Okay.
is of married to each other,
hmm
living with two parents who are married to each other. It's
hmm
38%,
hmm
right? So I guess this is the thing, right? Because what is an important factor to children, right? We as adults, right? We have a whole bunch of like social mores and whatever we want to impose on each other to shame each other or not or whatever. But when it comes to the actual development and wellness of children, right? What is the best thing for children to be in? In a functional, right? Productive two parent household.
Okay.
Their marital status, according to the law, actually isn't relevant. And that's why kids can come from two-parent married households that were incredibly dysfunctional and come out dysfunctional, right? And actually the dysfunction in society.
I hear
So,
what you're saying. Even in that
right?
stat, Ruby, 60%, 62% are not in that. So you're saying that the most productive way to raise children is in that 38%, which is not showing the out of what the status of the woman, and you're saying legally married when she birthed her children. But if we go
Hmm.
to the living arrangements, as you're saying, that 38% are married, then
Hmm.
62% are not.
Right.
And that would
So
be
that,
an issue as well. But the
right.
issue that we were discussing was rogue black men and their image impact on the image of black men in society.
Right. But in order for us to address that, we first have to get the numbers correct. I think that at least. And so let's go with 62% because that's on an inflated number. Okay. And that's based on marital status. Although to me personally, having a two-parent household period, regardless of your marital status, is more important. But you're saying marital status is more important. So we'll go with 62%. Now the question is this, and here's it's a very important question. Do you know why that they do all these statistics normally based on the mother and not on the father?
Now, if you'll tell me that, I'd like for you to share that with me.
Well, it's simply because the mother has to show up at the hospital and give birth to the kid, right?
Okay.
Whereas then the father doesn't.
Okay.
A. B. Paternity, it's, daddy's maybe. So the problem is, right, when people start trying to quote now these statistics about the fathers, right, 16% of the fathers versus 70% of women and whatever. First of all, that's highly skewed and absolutely ridiculous. It's not even correlating to the numbers that we do have. But the problem is we don't have correct numbers on that. Because if a woman does come in, right, so when we're talking about that 62% of unmarried women who give birth to a child, you have no idea what demographic that man came from.
Okay.
So saying in and out, you might be able to tell what demographic the woman came from,
Hmm.
right? Because that's the information we have. But short of paternity tests, which I think we've all agreed that generally we probably need a little bit more of those to help men. Um, we don't know who the father of those children are. So to blame it on, a particular small bottom 10% of, the black population and say, well, they're the ones who are impregnating those women as though men from the top 10% or just in the middle class somewhere aren't sleeping with those women and getting them pregnant as well. I
I
think it's a
did
little
acknowledge that
disingenuous.
the sexual promiscuity cross class lines. I did say that the problems were exacerbated by the lower strata who have
Hmm.
less education and have less income. That's where the most problems are. And so when you're discussing this also, Ruby, you're saying what point that you're making is that you're saying that you, on the one hand, you did say that coming from an intact family, married or not, is good for children. But we have,
Hmm.
from your statistics, 62% do not. And what are the outcomes that we're looking at? And as I said earlier, we were talking about the image of black men in American society and how that negative image impacts the perception of black manhood and masculinity.
Hmm. Hmm.
We were not
Absolutely.
necessarily, now that was one point made. I'm going to stick with the 72%. That's been a standard stat that's been going on. But as far as a cohabitating or married, you're saying 38%, which would be the accumulative amount of all married couples that are black, whatever their age group, but the 62% of children that are not would still have some problems. But we were concentrating on the image of black men and how the negative image of rogues, thug life, violent, angry black men is a negative image for all black men.
Oh, I agree. It's absolutely a negative image.
Hmm.
But I think part of the issue is we are allowing stereotypes and biases to drive and dictate the message instead of reality dictating the message, right? So, for example, and I posted the fact there, I don't want you to think I'm just pulling numbers out of thin air. So
Okay.
I posted in the private chat, right? So fathers with non-marital first births in the 2000s were less likely to be non-Hispanic Black men, those
Okay.
21% rate, than Hispanic, 33%, or non-Hispanic white men, which was 39%.
Okay.
So actually, Black men um, are having their first child born out of wedlock at a lesser rate than both Hispanic and white men. And yet,
Hmm.
those were two groups that you brought up in comparison
Hmm.
to Black people. So I think my issue is when we're talking about the Black male image, is that some of it is just based on stereotypes and biases that are not actually accurate.
Well, I was not concentrating on, that what I was concentrating on the image of black men and the thug life meme, the thug life persona, the image of the angry, violent black men as a problem for all black men who are law abiding, who want to have a productive opportunity to succeed in society. And
I I agree with that, sir, but I think that you conflate a lot of things together. So that statement as a standalone, I hear that. I agree with that. But then you start mixing other things in, and this is where I have an issue, like I said. So if you're going to bring up facts and statistics and say, well, see, look, these rogues, right? These no good nicks are over here, and they're the reason why all of our children are being born out of wedlock, or they're the biggest contributors, and look what the black man
I
is
did
doing to
not
the
say that
black
they
male
were the
image.
biggest contributors. I did say that they were contributors, and it's written clearly what I stated. And the point
Okay.
that you're trying to make right now related to the number of non-marital fathers at first birth, you're comparing white, Hispanic, and black to make the
Mhm.
point of,
To make the point of black men are not creating the most single mothers or the most out of wedlock babies, right?
mhm, because
Actually, white men are first.
we don't have a larger population than those other two groups by
No, but
percentage
they're
within our
talking about,
community.
right. They're
We
talking
would
about
talk
percentage.
about the number of births by black women, that number of births, not the number of cohabiting couples, but the number of births by black women, 70% are out of wedlock as far as what's identified as a legal marriage.
Okay,
But we only make up 13% of the American population as far as black people. So of course the other people who have rising out of wedlock birth rates would be greater than ours, but that does not negate the facts that I'm discussing in the presentation.
right. But here's the thing, right? Because, and again, I think a lot of times people cherry pick certain facts and information and put them together without looking at those statistics um, in other realms. So I'm putting this now into a whole different category where I'm saying, well, actually, our out of wedlock birth rate has risen just like everyone else's, mind you, right? It's gone up uh, three times, right? Um,
Okay.
right? But then the white out of wedlock birth rate has gone up five times. It's five times higher now than it was. So, and ours is three times higher than it was. So, what I'm trying to say, right, is that there's a systemic social issue, right, that is affecting obviously Western society, that is affecting America, that is bigger than Black people, right? And then on top of that, we have other systems and issues that are affecting us individually as a culture, right? But what I'm saying is there's something that we're ignoring, which is that this is a global issue, right? So when something is happening to the society as a whole, you can't ignore the fact that it's happening to the rest of the society and point at black people and say, see, these black people are screwing up. Why don't you be more like XYZ group? Well, we can't because XYZ group is doing the same thing, right? So we're having that same global issue. So it's an issue that actually is a bigger than us as individuals or as an individual community. It's happening to the society.
I would agree with you on that. My concern is what the impact is on the black community. That's why I was emphasizing that.
I agree with you, sir. My concern is also how it's impacting the Black community. But I think in order to get to solutions, we have to identify the causes correctly. And so we have to identify when the cause is our fault, right? And is an individualized or underlying issue that is only affecting the Black community or is being only really caused by the Black community's actions, and you don't see it in other populations versus when it's an American issue, when it's a Western world issue. Because
Hmm.
then, in order to create a solution, right, we would have to go about it in a different way.
That's one way of looking at it. Now, some solutions are going as Shar was going to the next start parts of the presentation. We'll talk about some suggested solutions in a macro level, and then there are some solutions at a micro level as well.
All right. Well, why don't we do that then? Why don't
Okay.
we go ahead? I would love to hear the solutions if Char's ready to go.
Hit go.
Shar, are you getting your red wine right now? Is everything going good for
Red,
you? Okay,
red
then.
wine.
I
Yep.
am getting it in,
Yes, girl.
but I would like to.
All right, Shar, I got you.
I'm gonna pass the reading over to Ruby. Let me see if I
Oh,
can find it here.
okay.
Because I find this to be kind of interesting. It was I googled respectability politics, and this came up, and
Ooh.
it might be in the information that Ray has given me, but if it isn't, let's still take a peep at it, and then we'll look at some more stuff that he has.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's see here. Let's see, what is this? Stop sharing, and then share. Let's see what the title is. Oh, Google. All right. Wait a minute, that's the wrong Google. I have two Googles open. What is the title? Respectability politics, how flaw. Okay.
Problem is, girl, you're not used to having tab issues on Fridays, right? Like tab issues are a Saturday thing, and you're prepared for them in advance. I understand.
Right, this is new to me.
Hmm.
And I'll put it also, let me see how long it is. So that way, if you want to read it on
Okay,
your
yeah.
own, it'd be bigger because I know how it's a struggle. So let me find chat, StreamYard. Uh oh. There we go.
While you're just setting that up, I just have to say one thing also because
Hmm.
something, and I can't remember if it was specifically what Ray said or it was just sparked within the discussion between the two of y'all. But, I just have to bring this up because it's an issue that I have seen across my family and friends, and people I've dated, both in Canada and America, is this belief system, right? Normally pushed by the right, that if police arrest you or pull you over, it's because you did something wrong. And if it goes badly, well, it's because you did something wrong to exacerbate that issue, right? And it doesn't matter how many countless stories channels like Char and I, or the Indisputable, or wherever, do to bring out how many countless stories make the news. So you imagine how many don't make the news of people that this happens to, and no matter how much they try to dig, they can't find a way to criminalize that person because that person wasn't a criminal. You have men who are great thinkers within the society, who are, master's PhD level, who are scientists, who are dorks, who are, never been cool, never been gangsta, never been any of that stuff, who have been harassed, who have been beaten, who have been jailed, when they were innocent, when they did absolutely nothing wrong. And of course, this is something that has been brought up by police officers who have said, listen, we were told we've got a quota to make. And yeah, we can't go over to the white community, even though that's where we're supposed to be patrolling, because God forbid we pull over some lawyer's kid or something. That'll be a waste of our energy and won't count towards our quota. So we're going to go to the black community, even though there's already 2 or 3 patrols in the black community, because we can harass those kids and get our quota up. And you know what? They're not powerful enough to fight back, in essence. And so they've admitted that they actually intentionally do this, where they intentionally criminalize. We have video now, body cam, countless police
Hmm.
officers planting little baggies of coke or weed or something on some dude because they got to make their quota this month. So we can't act Like, it doesn't happen that dudes who are dressed respectably, who act respectably, who are doing absolutely nothing wrong, are not hassled or arrested or beaten, or institutionalized by the police and by this legal justice system. And the reason why they were targeted is because of the color of their skin. So no matter how hard they were working, it didn't matter. I love that I see a Philando Castile on this, because every time I think about this, I even have it in a video, right? The Philando Castile story just brings just shiver up my spine and horrifies me because he did everything right and it just didn't matter.
Yeah. I kind of stay away from some of those stories because it makes me so upset. And I even tried to get a team together to try to do something about it. But see, I only want to be in the background. I don't want to be the head of it. So
Hmm.
until the men contact me, and then I'll get active. But hopefully,
Right.
it'll continue. We'll see. But
Hmm.
this is the article here. I put it in the chat. Are you able to read it?
Yes, I'm going to open it in a new tab right
Okay.
now so that way we can see it. Okay, so you want me to start from the beginning?
Yeah, this
And
is what I found on what he has written. So I'm like, oh, let me see what someone else says.
all
So
right, cool.
okay.
All right, you just tell me when you want me to stop. I'm a good reader. Always have been. My teachers told me so. Okay. Um,
Okay, congrats on that.
thank you, thank you. I know I'm a grade grubber. I can't help it. Um, Respectability politics: how a flawed conversation sabotages Black lives. I have tracked the issue of respectability politics as it burst onto the national stage recently. Unfortunately, little of the conversation it has sparked has been worth hearing. After Philando Castile was gunned down by a Minnesota police officer, Portland Trailblazer point guard Lillard tweeted that after Black people take better care of each other, they can then take the battle further in demanding that we be treated better from others. Critics torched him for practicing respectability politics. Charles Barkley, shortly thereafter, echoed such remarks. I've always said we as Black people, if you want respect, you've got to give each other respect. You can't demand respect from white people and the cops if we don't respect each other. Barkley suffered the same blistering as Lillard. So did civil rights leader Andrew Young after he mocked Black Lives Matter protesters who blocked traffic in downtown Atlanta as unlovable little brats. Young said he feared they would mess up the climate we have taken 50 years to build, implying his generation's activism bested the millennials' offerings. Each castigation occurred in just the month of July. Respectability politics has quickly become one of the most punished crimes in Black political thought. What is respectability politics? It is a relatively straightforward and centuries old racial progress strategy. It instructs Blacks to disprove, through their personal behavior, some whites' notions that racial inequality persists because of Blacks' biological or cultural inferiority. Devotees of respectability politics preach their gospel for two reasons. First, they hope whites will notice when Blacks have reached respectability and, consequently, treat Black people better. And second, to further Black folks' own interests regardless of white approval. Now, the first reason bears the true hallmark of respectability politics. Harvard McClurkin, an Africology professor at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, provided me a humorous definition. The politics of respectability, he said, is the idea that Blacks need to improve their behavior. And why are they doing it? So white people will see it and reward us. They'll give us a cookie. We'll get cookies. We'll get pats on the head. If I were to implore young Black men to pull up their pants to elicit better treatment from white law enforcement officers, I would be practicing respectability politics. Lillard and Barkley essentially did this. They directed Blacks to improve their behavior to receive better treatment from white cops. Regarding Young, though, unless we know he maligned Black protesters for not behaving in a manner that would win white approval, although some will say we can infer this, critics should avoid maligning him for practicing respectability politics. Much of the upsurge in respectability politics talk is due to the protest movement against police, involved shootings, deaths. Some espouse in your face tactics. Others prefer the methods of the civil rights movement. When these two viewpoints clash, proponents of aggressive tactics accuse their opponents of championing respectability politics. But such conversations have moved well beyond the context of police brutality. Whether Luke Cage, a Netflix show based on a Marvel comic book, endorses respectability politics is an actual conversation people are having. Members of the LGBTQ community police each other's remarks for instances of respectability politics. Muslims do too. The conversation about Black respectability politics, however, has been strikingly superficial and unsatisfying. Specious arguments, historical misunderstandings, missed observations. I feel worse for having listened to it. Let's start with the simplest issue first. So many hurl the charge at undeserving targets. Okay,
I,
we are on the next section. Should I keep reading?
that's enough for now, or probably just enough. Now, with that being said, this is this article tells me that this is something that is like a ideology,
Mm-hmm.
a belief system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's like a choice. You can go, you can, this can be your ideology, or Catholic, or Baptist, Methodist, so on and so forth. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you were to remove this one, and you have so many more to choose from, can you say that this is working? And that
No.
question is for Ray.
Mm.
Can I say that respectability politics is working?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and where,
Well,
if so?
well, most of the laws that we got changed were based on people showing as productive people who want to work within the legal system to build the type of society that we need. So when we got the Civil Rights Act and things of that nature, those are the things that were based on the image of working within the system, the image of being respectable and being law abiding.
And where is it working? In particular
Well, the
cities,
fact
or?
that that we have the opportunities that we have today, not perfect, but we can vote, we can participate in the economy. For the most part, we can live where we want to live. Uh, if we have the finances to do so, we can go to many of the schools that we want to. We basically can have a better life than our grandparents had, and we do have a better life than our grandparents had. And most of us even have a better life than our parents have. We're trying to build on that. But I don't see image of thug life, violence, criminality as a way for social and political progress.
Well, if you could be more specific than that, because I think the issue is this, right? I mean, I lived in an upper middle class neighborhood and went to like the rich white people school,
Hmm.
and everyone dressed approximately the same. And that was basically hip hop culture, right? Whatever was happening in music videos from 1999 to 2003 while I was in high school, that's what everyone of all races were wearing. Okay. That sagging pants thing, that actually here started with white skater boys, right? Who wore
Okay.
their pants down to their knees, before black folk did it here. Likewise in America, hoodies. Hoodies are a national trend. That's why everyone's merch stores have some kind of hoodie in it with their logo and whatever, regardless of race, right? So, let's stop, tying in your clothing choices with violence and murder and gang banging and all of that, because you wearing a hoodie and your pants sagging is not the same thing as someone watching you rob some lady, right? So the question is, if you pull your pants up and don't wear hoodies and wear chinos and nice shoes and cut your hair low so that way your black hair is unoffensive to white people, right? Is that going to prevent you from being pulled over erroneously just because of the color of your skin? And if so, where is some evidence that the only people that they are harassing are the ones who wear, hoodies or gangster apparel, and nobody who is dressed business or, nice and preppy and driving a nice car and whatever is being pulled over, stopped, harassed, beaten, or killed by the police.
Okay, the short answer is you're correct. That will not be the case at 100%. However, I'd like to give you an example of a mentee who grew up in a lower middle class working background. He lost his mother in the ninth grade. He was at a special STEM education high school, and he pretty much joined ROTC when he went to a historically black college, got a chemistry degree. ROTC, the Air Force Health Profession, I apologize, the Navy Health Profession Scholarship allowed him to go to medical school debt free. He's a lieutenant commander in the medical corps, and he came from a poor background. He didn't have the sagging pants. He lost his mother in the ninth grade, and his image as a coachable, teachable young man in high school, in college, got him to get a full scholarship at a historically black college, got him to get the Navy Health Profession Scholarship, and to go to medical school debt free. And he's a lieutenant commander in the Navy Medical Corps Reserves, and he's also a practicing physician. So things are not perfect. There's not going to be 100%. There are going to be abuses of any system, but presenting yourself as a thug, as a hoodlum, as someone who presents a violent, defiant image is not conducive for black men who are at marginalized in American society.
Okay, but do you disagree then with the research that has been conducted that proved that, I mean, and they do these bias studies all the time, right? So they've proven, for example, if people are flashed a scene where there is a white dude who is robbing a lady, right? And then a black man dressed respectably over there in the corner, and they flash that scene for a second and then put it down, what people will associate is the violence with the black person, regardless of how they are dressed.
Mhm.
Or for example, the research that suggests that non-black people see our children as young as 8 years old as actual adults, especially our young men, as
Mhm.
adults, and not just adults, but that they generally see black faces and black skin. The darker the skin, the more aggressive and violent the tendencies they paint onto this person, regardless of their dress, regardless of their actions, regardless of their speech. Do you disagree with that information that has been
I don't
found through
disagree with that
decades of research?
information. White
Okay.
privilege is real. White people have more privileges than non-whites. If you're a person that is a part of the group that does not have the privileges and the power, you can't act like that and expect to be treated the same way. So your objective is to increase your power status by legitimate legal means. So if you're continually participating in criminality, you disdain educational development, you disdain civility and participating in the political system. If your goal is to not get married and bond with a woman and raise children with her and be committed to her, but you want to run through 100, 200, and 300 women by the time you're 35 because that's cool, that's thugging it out, there's no productivity that's coming out of that type of behavior. And that's all I'm saying is that we don't have a perfect system. I do believe we have a good system. It needs more work. Our ancestors paid a very heavy price for us to get to where we are. And as Andrew Young has stated, we don't want to mess it up in one generation where we basically are treated as fourth class citizens because of the imagery coming out of hip hop culture, the imagery coming out of a lot of these films and series on power, thug life, and all of that, whereby,
Right. But sir, the
you
thing
know,
is, you keep again conflating the actions and lifestyle of the bottom 10% with all basically black people. And see that that's actually my issue in general, regardless of who uses these arguments, is that they are conflating the bottom 10% with all. And the thing is that I agree with you about the bottom 10%, right? But the bottom 10% is the bottom 10%. And no other race but ours is judged solely on what the bottom 10% are doing. And nobody justifies for treating all of a demographic according to their bottom 10%, except for the Black community, right? Everyone justifies this. And so it's acceptable to say, well, if that kid was wearing a hoodie and I saw a gangster wearing a hoodie someday on TV, well, I can then therefore treat that kid like he is a gangster because I can treat all Black people like they are not only that they are a monolith, but that they are all a monolith of the bottom 5% of the population. And so the problem is, sir, I absolutely agree with you. Should we try? Should we not engage in certain things? Absolutely. But the problem is that you do have a lot of young brothers and sisters and even adult people who are doing exactly what you're saying. And yet it doesn't change them being targeted. In fact, if anything, in some cases, it makes them more of a target because now they're living in a better neighborhood, getting pulled over on their own damn street because they're a Black face in an affluent neighborhood and Black people don't belong in affluence. Or the woman who was literally arrested and thrown in the loony bin for driving her own car. Seriously, she was driving her rich, expensive Mercedes and her rich, expensive clothing from her rich, expensive job and her rich, expensive associates. And when the police were told about all of this, they decided she must be crazy. We're not even going to check the registration on the car. We are just going to throw her in the loony bin because she must be crazy because Black women could not be that successful, right? She doesn't know Obama. There's no way. She doesn't work that job. There's no way. You would never hear about that happening to a white man because a white man who's driving a flashy car and wearing a flashy suit, you just, yeah, of course he must be rich. And when he says he knows the president, you back off because you're scared of what's going to happen, right? Where the opposite happens with Black people. It doesn't matter how you have dressed or how you've lived your whole entire life or how eloquent you are or whatever, because they are racist, right? They have built up all these stereotypes against Black people, saying all Black people are the bottom 5%. And so they will judge you based on the fact that you are the bottom 5% in top 10% clothing.
Well, if I can just wait.
People who are in the media, the people who produce these rap videos, imagery, and all the hip hop culture of that time, they're the ones that did that, not people like me. I have not stated that all Blacks should be looked upon, down upon, based on the imagery of a few. I'm saying that the imagery of a few is what is promulgated as the reality of Black manhood. When you think of Black manhood, you're not talking about General Lloyd Austin, who is the four-star general, Secretary of Defense for the United States military, the most powerful military in the world. You're not thinking about that. You're not necessarily thinking about an orthopedic surgeon at Johns Hopkins University. When you're talking about Black, one moment on that, Gray, let me finish my point, and you come in. When you're thinking about Black male imagery, it's negative. And to change that to positive, those are the things that our article talks about, that we should be raising our Black boys to emulate the best of Black male excellence, to emulate people like General Lloyd Austin, to emulate people like Senator Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock, to get in positions of power and authority. Thug life will not get you the power that you want. Thug life will more than likely get people in jail, and that these other entities push that image of all Black men is the problem. Not that we're discussing that, but that for all of these years and even decades, that image of Black manhood has been a negative image.
Go ahead, Cerulli. I have so much to say, but go ahead. I know you've been holding it too.
See, no, because this is the assumption that the broader white audience, the broader white majority has. That we Negroes don't look at Lloyd Austin or a Colin Powell or a Condoleezza Rice or anybody as symbols of masculinity or femininity, right? That's really a projection of the broader white society. That's not a thing that was created by Black Americans. When Colin Powell was the Secretary of State, right? I remember black people being proud of them. My father being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather thought he would never see a black man standing as high up on Capitol Hill as a Colin Powell, 50-something years old, being an ammo runner in World War II. When he faced the worst type of discrimination, when they treated the Nazis better than they treated the black soldiers.
Right.
So when we get into to these things, this is why no other group really uses respectability politics. It's because you're the reason. You're it's like a social anxiety that you're placing on yourself, saying, well, it's this minority's fault.
Right.
It's this little subsect of our already minoritous group. It's their fault, the reason why we have that image. No, it's never been the reason why we've had that image.
Ever.
I remember back before the civil rights legislation of 1964, most of black men wore suits and were still had violence come onto them by state agents. Okay,
yep.
Whether it be police, whether it be FBI, very upstanding men. Okay, the problem is that because of the way society has transformed, and because of living in the age of decadence, now they just have more things to blame the reason why we commit these acts of barbarism against black people.
Right.
And now, the one that they've been running with for the last at least 30 or 40 years is this idea of black on black violence, which we know is American on American violence.
Right. Which is literally, again, associated not with race, right, but with poverty, first of all. And second of all, I'm glad that you brought up that point that even when the common dress for black folk were suits and ties and whatever, it didn't change the way that they were treated or perceived. In fact, so much so, I remember this with my generation specifically, and yes, both in America and Canada, with my generation, the way that we started dressing was actually to push back against this idea that we had to be these perfect specimens in order for us to get a modicum of respect. Right? We had to be these perfects. We couldn't be like the white folk and just wear, teen clothing because we're teens, and still deserve to be treated like, respectable, intelligent people. And so we were actually intentionally pushing back against that narrative with our dress. So in case you didn't know that, we did do it on purpose.
I got a comment I'd like to go ahead and add real quick, if you'll hold for me just a second on it, Gray. We could use a generation or two of Black American model minorities. I understand that not all people, I understand the legitimate pushback toward individuality, but we could use a couple of generations of Black model minorities where we're excelling academically as young Black men, where we're knocking it out at college ROTC, where we are becoming scientists, engineers, technologists, mathematicians, MBAs.
This is the reason why
we could use a couple of generations of model minorities to counter the damage of that hip hop culture.
But sir, we are.
Created that. There were a lot of guys like that.
Sir, hip hop culture is a very small part of our population, and this is the problem. This is, I think, the thing that y'all are missing. It gets spoken about. It's the loud minority, but the thing is, what you don't understand is it's the minority. Right? We do everything that you're saying about the respectable population having a respectable demographic. Actually, the majority of Black people are law-abiding, respectable, tax-paying citizens. We are in more and more positions of leadership, power in STEM than ever before. So actually what you're saying, and this is why this whole respectability thing is bullshit, because the thing is that it's only the loud minority, it's only this bottom 5-10% that is not being, thought leaders and being respectable and being in the sciences and being tax-paying citizens and all of that. Right? It's only the bottom 5%, but yet we're allowing that. And I'm saying that I said that you are part of the issue, sir, because you are propagating it as being true. And that's why I'm saying, no, we are allowing the bottom 5% to represent the entire population. And we refuse to accept the fact that, no, actually the far larger majority is actually doing exactly what you're saying. And yet somehow or another, no matter what, right? We can't just be like every other population where we are judged, but at least by the average, or the top 10%. No, no, no. We continue to accept the fact that the bottom 5% defines us always, even though no other population is defined by their bottom 5% or by their loud majority.
And that is wholly a narrative created by whites.
Yep.
This is why I have to interrupt, right? Talking about a couple of generations of model minorities. We already have that.
Right.
Or what, the greatest generation wasn't model enough? Was it the boomer generation? They weren't model enough? The Gen Xers weren't model enough? The Gen Xers tried to give their children everything they didn't have, or everything that their boomer parents couldn't afford. Or is it the millennium generation, right? Literally, the millennium generation is almost a mirrored effect of the greatest generation. The largest amount of wealth generation is happening with the millennials and the Zs.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the point that you finished with that great way.
What part of history did you skip in school?
Okay, we'll go ahead, and I want to make this point right here. That may be more the case of Black women who are acclimating better in the digital economy than Black men. Right now, more Black women are graduating from college, professional school, something like at a rate of 60%. Just recently, a friend of mine was discussing that the entering class of Howard University Law School has 160 students. Only 35 are Black men. We may need to emphasize that the image of Black men for 2 generations be moving toward a model minority status for the present generation, because we need more Black men in STEM. We need more Black men in business. We need more Black men as commissioned officers in the military. We need more Black men in a variety of areas. So to move forward to counter that negative image that may have come from non-Black people, that may have come from from a variety of sources, that may in fact, or is in fact the minority, that's the image that is promulgated by the media, by the American media. And so to counter that, having more men that are aiming to do what Lloyd Austin has done as a 4-star general, having more men who are scientists, who are engineers, who are businessmen with legitimate businesses that employ Black people, more people in a variety of programs.
You literally still have an ongoing lawsuit, ongoing class action lawsuit against Apple for their theft of programs and things that they have written and designed for that company and never received the credit, not even a mention in the research notes. You have the same thing happening with Microsoft. Years of stealing from Black engineers. And now, if you would have said something like in my opinion, to expand or increase the number of, say, Black middle class, I would agree with that. But to fight some image that has been imposed and projected on us by another group of people, that's total bullshit.
That is an image that has been a request to expand the middle class. When we have at least 25% of our Black men college educated, 50% at least highly skilled blue collar professionals, that is taking people out of poverty and putting them solidly in the middle class. The image would change when you have people in desperate situations where they feel that they are forced to get into illegal activities, and they're then pipelined into the prison system. That doesn't help us. But when we have resources and we have the drive to change the imagery and also, in fact, present Black male manhood as women's, then we are changing that. Although there is a trend of that, Black women are dominating. We just had a sister who is been elected CEO of TIAA CREF, a $1 trillion Teachers Insurance and Annuity Association, the NBA. We'll get her name in just a moment. You've got a sister that's moving. So as men, if we're challenging this image, we cannot be apologists for people.
You literally already have that.
Pushing. Go for it. Say it again. I don't hear you. Say it again.
But saying when you look at the history and lineage of Black America, you literally already have that.
We
You're
may have
going
had
by
that in previous generations,
going
but this
by some
particular generation is
projection.
not displaying that. We
Wait,
have an absence of black men in higher education. We have an
wait,
absence of
wait,
black men in
wait, wait.
corporate
Pause,
America.
pause, pause,
We're
pause,
even
pause, brother.
having the decline of black men in politics to where most mayors and most congressional representatives and the upcoming governors and senators in black states will be black women.
And you have a problem with that?
I don't have a problem with that, but we're talking about the image of black men. So if we have an image that is predominating unfairly,
You know what I find funny?
we'll acknowledge. Let me make a point on that, Gray. Let me
Let me
make a
stop you
point.
right. Let me
If we
stop you
have an
right there,
image of
bro.
black
No, no,
men
no,
that is
no.
the predominating, this is a negative, violent, underachieving image, even though that is not the reality, the goal is to present an image that is positive, productive, that will show black male excellence. That's what I'm advocating for. And
Give
it
me
is about economic development, it's about personal development, and it's about developing leadership for black boys to become excellent black men.
give me one moment to acknowledge CC. He says highest jobless rate, highest abortion rates, lowest marriage rates, and highest murder rates. CC, if you would kindly answer this question, are any of those abortions your children? And you have made him sing, you have made she sing, so let's get it.
Hey now.
Thank you so
Um,
much. And let me say a few things and then you all can have the rest of the night, really.
okay.
Now, what I have on the screen, I kind of highlighted where Andrew Young called those protesters unlovable little brats. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the love and support and all that with, name calling. These kids, if
Well,
they were kids, I don't know if they were children. I don't know how old they
well,
were.
Char, you're talking about Andrew Young, right? And I remember this during the protest
Uh huh.
where Andrew Young basically said of the Black community that we brought white violence onto ourselves because of our well-to-do nature, uh, being perceived as doing better than the whites who were committing these lone wolf type attacks against Black people.
Oh wow, I didn't know
Like this
anything
is Andrew
about
Young
that,
saying this.
but let me
When did
tell you
Andrew Young
this.
say that, Gray? What year was that stated? Because he's in his 80s now. When did he say something like that?
Well, apparently he's been senile for at least 20 of those
Okay.
If
last
you
years.
have the information, I would like to check it out because I remember this man when I was a little girl. I can
But
see
I
the
remember
young
it was
face, and I can
I,
see him maybe as old as 60. But I want to point out the fact that he, called protesters. They're trying to do something that he used to do 40, 50 years ago. He called them unlovable. How do he know that they're unlovable? He don't know their parents. So I thought that was, pretty insulting. Consider
well,
that he,
well,
uses the.
he
Um,
comes up in the generation
mhm.
where where blacks suffer trauma for doing nothing more than marching for their rights. So he's calling these people the same thing whites would call his generation when they would do the very same activity.
That's terrible. Now, let me also mention with jobs. Now, I hear Ray mention about the jobs, but I do remember my parents mentioning running moonshine and different things, and those were jobs that they taken, and it was illegal, so they could eat. So, again with the morality, everything can't be, moral, if you will, to eat. And then I want to mention that those that were respecting each other at one time, there were planes that went overhead in Tulsa and destroyed that community, that whole system. So there was love and getting along and everything, but you see how that worked out.
Char,
And
do you know that after World War I, black soldiers, the black community literally used to hold these huge parades for black soldiers that returned from war. That tradition literally carried on until after the end of the Korean War, where white society told black communities around the country that they needed a permit to do these things.
Oh.
And then bye-bye goes to your celebrations of your black returning heroes.
Wow.
Well, what I would say
Can
now,
I?
Char, on that. Well, go ahead, Ruby. Go ahead if you're gonna make a
Oh
comment.
no, sorry. If you want to respond to that, it's okay. I want to bring up something totally new. I want Char to pull up the link that I that
Okay,
I
okay.
posted.
Okay.
So go ahead.
No, I'm good. I'll go and look at the next step that you're discussing.
Okay. So I want to discuss this, and Char, if you can scroll down to the link that I posted, there's a chart there. It says Black home ownership rates have barely risen since 1970. And so I kind of want to talk about this is pretty much my point right here in a nutshell. I'm going to bring up some information because I think the thing is, right,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure, Ray, how old you are, but what I've noticed is with a lot of people who are under 40 in our community, we kind of associate knowing our history with slavery. And, you know, there's like this, I don't want to be associated with slavery thing. So therefore, I don't care about our history. I don't care about the history of the Black community. It's about right now. And see, the thing is that when we do that, we don't actually take into account um, really what position we were even born in and why that's having an effect, right? So this chart here, right now, they're talking about the fact that there was a recession there in the 1990s. But up until the 1980s, you can see the yellowish line, right? That's Black home ownership, right? And then you see this bluish line, that's white, and then Hispanic, right? And so our home ownership line was really high up there, right? I mean, it was pretty much equivalent with like Asians, higher than whites, right? And that was in the 1980s. And then all of a sudden, there's a significant drop before the recession hit. Well, what
Well, do you know
happened?
what?
Right?
Do you know
Hold on.
what?
Give me a sec. Let me finish my point first. Right. So, well, what happened with that? Oh, well, what happened was all of the predatory lending, right? That was done. That was supposedly illegal, but of course was still done. Came to a head, and it bankrupted 80% of the middle class Black community. Right. So that's point number one. Right. But then, of course, people go, well, that was back in the 1980s. And then what about what's happening now? Well, here's the thing. It's not like they stopped doing it. Right. And so they are actually still to this day, even though they're not allowed to use the exact same systems because they are literally illegal, they still use them. Right. And so what you will see is African Americans, right, versus whites. I'm going to give you this information. African Americans with similar credit profiles and down payment ratios to white borrowers are still more likely to receive subprime loans, according to this study. As a result, from 1993 to 2000, the share of subprime mortgages going to households in minority neighborhoods rose from 2 to 18%. Okay, they have done studies that are proving right now that when people go to get their houses appraised, right, they might actually get up to a 300% increase in the appraisal of their household, right? So it has nothing to do with the household, it has to do with their race, just by putting a white face there instead of their own, right? So what we have to understand, right, is that it's not just about what we are choosing to do as people or how respectable we are. There really is an issue where we are being targeted based on our race solely, right? And then we are being disadvantaged as a result of that, which then keeps toppling our community as recently as now, okay? And so we are always fighting against these things. So when we want to say, well, if you just dress respectably and you have a good job and you live in a decent neighborhood, you'll be fine. Yeah, but what about issues like this, right? What about the issues like, well, hey, you know what? You're going to get less money for your house when you sell it versus your white counterpart, right? You are not going to get the same kind of loan as your white counterpart. So guess what? Your white counterpart and you are going to buy the same house in the same neighborhood. You're going to have the same down payment ratio with the same credit. You could probably even have a little bit better credit, but guess what? They're going to pay off their house faster and easier, right? It's going to actually be far harder for you to be able to maintain that. Why? They are doing it on
Well,
purpose. You have to understand that there really is a system that is
Mhm.
holding us back as individuals. So stop. This is why I have an issue with you always referring to the bottom 5% in gangs and drugs, because that's such a small minority of our population and the things that we're fighting against. The far larger majority of our population are fighting against issues like this.
well,
I agree with you. I've never denied that there was not systematic or institutional problems or discrimination and adversity on that. We were talking about the image of black manhood and how the negative image of thug life, although a smaller actual percentage of black men, is promulgated as the image of black men, and that's problematic for most black men. Now,
all right.
yeah.
Let me explain something because that chart right there, there's so much that's actually going on in that chart. All right.
I knew you'd have some stuff to say.
At the end of the Korean War, the Congress made it illegal to redline communities based on color. Okay. By 1970, redlining is still going on under the auspices of states' rights. So in places like Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, even Texas, even a lot of places up in the north, like for instance the state that I'm in, Minnesota, still had racial covenants. Okay,
Yep.
1970 rolls around, in the midst of the Vietnam War. 1971, Nixon removes the gold standard. Between 1971 and 1975, a rate of hyperinflation was 300%. So if you could afford a house in, say, 1971, or even if you were a veteran coming back from Vietnam in 1975, imbued with all of the benefits, such as the VA home loan that would allow you to buy a house, well, guess what? That rate of inflation at 300%, well, your VA home loan was going to be denied, which is why in 1978, they had to make it a thing where they couldn't use any of these external factors. The home loan had to be a guarantee. That happens in 1978. But by then, do you know what happened also in 1978? There was a bunch of domestic terrorist attacks on veterans record centers around the country. One of those being in my home state of Alabama, one of the biggest fires. And it wasn't just black veterans, it was, Latino veterans and white veterans that were living in impoverished Alabama that couldn't even prove that they were in the military to take advantage of their VA home loans. Because back then they didn't keep your records on microfiche. They kept them on hard records. And if your building where your records were being kept lit on fire, that was it. Poof. It's done. You're not getting nothing. So we superimpose that all the way up until 2008. Just had a housing crisis. And once again, you have a slew of veterans, a slew of military men returning home from fighting the global war on terror. And then you know what's happening. They're being denied because, once again, because of the housing market, ran into a period of stagflation and then hyperinflation, to where those VA, those returning veterans couldn't afford the houses that they were looking at. And therefore, because of that, wealth that would have been generated by getting those homes was never generated by the housing crisis of 2007 and 8, which is also why Obama in 2008 did the post 9/11 GI Bill, because that rate of hyperinflation increased the cost of education, especially post-secondary, i.e. college, to where $40,000 and $50,000 couldn't get you a bachelor's degree anymore. That was merely just 1 year at college, depending on what college you went to. So what he did was the post 9/11 GI Bill, which matched whatever your existing GI Bill prior to 9/11 would have been, to double the GI Bill. So if you were in the military between 2001 and now, you still qualify for the GI Bill. But if you left the military prior to 2001, you don't even qualify. So guess what happens to those Vietnam and Desert Storm era veterans? They never get an opportunity to grow wealth through real estate. And that's why you see this right here. Why am I saying we never got the chance to? The highest recorded time period in which Black people, especially Black men, nearly monopolized the military was all the way up until 1998. And do you know what happened in 1998? Well, you had the Hispanicization Act, which is what began the legal importation of South American immigrants into the country. And then what happened was some well-to-do Negroes, Andrew Young being one of them, that supported this idea that we should import more Africans, like Nigerians, notorious for scamming the Nigerian Prince scheme and all of these other things. And these people came here to become your new replacements. Now, the funny thing about it is when he did these acts, they got all types of provisions. These weren't provisions that anybody could just get. Resources, access to cold, hard cash to do what? Buy homes and buy businesses. Black Americans never got such a thing. So whenever we're talking about, our image should be that of excellence, like your image is already one of excellence, because the Black male is the only, literally, Black people are the only group that have never received a government handout, like say a check, a relocation assistance, and a stipend every freaking month just for living in a place until that family got on their feet. Never received that. Okay? And literally, this 1970 thing, you go all the way back, that's 51 years now. 51 years. And today, Black men specifically are just as economically disadvantaged in 2021 as they were in 1970 before leaving the gold standard. But in 1970, you still had Black men mostly walking around wearing suits, ties.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And can I just point out really quickly, right? Because Black excellence apparently doesn't exist. We're just all a bunch of gang bangers in tenement housing. And yet, somehow or another, even in this chart, that is showing, right, it's a visual representation of how many times we have been attacked and targeted so that way our home ownership would suck. But look at this. In 1970, it was 41.8%. And by 2019, it's 42.3%, right? So there's a very small net increase. But let's not get it twisted. That's still 42% of the population that is our homeowners, right? So the fact that we speak about the majority of the population as though they are all in some type of welfare housing, all gang bangers and, not being, contributing members to society, ain't got shit, ain't about shit, ain't never going to be about shit. Well, I mean, even this chart that is showing us, right? Oh, there's a discrepancy between the Black community homeownership. We're at the lowest, right? Asians are at the highest. It's still showing us that, wait a minute, we're almost at 50% of the population owns homes.
But
Despite
at the
the
same
fact
time,
that we are targeted and our communities are still being redlined, are still getting predatory mortgages, are still being unfairly rated, and are still rated as being the highest communities to foreclose. And yet somehow or another we're still at 50%. So please stop representing our
but
community
hold
like
on,
we ain't shit.
Hold
We're
hold
hold
a
on,
fighters.
minute.
hold
Well,
on,
who's
Hold
but
representing?
hold
one
on,
I'm
minute,
because
just
guys.
if
representing
you
it at hip
superimpose
hop
this,
culture, and
One
those
minute,
people have
people.
done that, but I have not represented us like that.
1 second. Let
okay,
me
hold on.
give Vonda
Mm,
her sing because she
okay.
made Sheed sing. Thank you so much for your
Ooh.
support. Hit it,
Mm.
Sheed.
Yeah, we needed some of that. Cause
And see,
goddamn.
but
All
if you
right.
superimpose this data onto the data collected by, Derek Hamilton or Dr. Sandy Darity, right? You'll see why this disparity is actually a lot worse than we think it is. Because according to the amount of wealth that has grown amongst Black society between 1970 and 2021, it's literally greater than the amount of wealth generation between the end of World War One and the Civil Rights Bill. It's greater, and therefore you would think that that disparity, I mean, would go from at least 40 to 50, but it hasn't, despite having more than three times the population that you did in 1920, despite having a rate of inflation to where you're literally making 10 times as much as the people were making in 1970. Like you're making 10 times that much.
All right.
Where in 1970, I mean, your minimum wage was still like $1.80, $1.50.
Oh yeah.
And
Hmm.
you
There's two things I wanted to ask or say. One is I want to ask Ray, what year did respectability politics begin? Was created?
I'm not certain there were some writers that wrote about that. I do know that during the civil rights era in the 50s and 60s, they utilized people who had, quote, a respectable background to protest. Say, for instance, there was a woman before
Hmm.
Rosa Parks who had stood up for herself and didn't want to move to the back of the bus. But at the time, the Montgomery NAACP felt her background, she was a single mother at the time when that
Yep.
wasn't very common.
it
So
had nothing
they
to do
did
with the
not
background,
utilize
by the way.
her to stage the protest. They waited till after Rosa Parks, who
That's
was
true.
married, who kind
But it
of
had nothing to
presented
do with
that
her back.
respectable image that
It had
they
nothing
needed.
to do with her background. It had everything to do with her skin tone because she was too dark to be marketable to a white mainstream audience. That's really
Okay.
why they used Rosa Parks. It had nothing to do with her background per se. Had everything to do with the fact that she was lighter skinned, and they thought that the darker skinned woman was more intimidating or too intimidating for white America to see black women as humans.
I agree with that, but I would think that also her being a single mother, um, in that era would have reflected poorly. So that probably did also come into,
Actually,
the
actually,
picture.
it didn't as much as actually it didn't as much as you think. And the reason why is because single mothers, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, we they assumed that if they were a single mother, probably your husband may have died in a war, or may have been killed because, well, you didn't really have like workman's compensation or necessarily safe work environments. I mean, that was only a movement started in the late 70s. You know,
Mm. I mean, I hear you.
so
I do think also, though, I mean, they still had, those houses for unwed mothers, and it was still, I mean, shotgun weddings and whatnot. So, I mean, again, I do also agree with you. on the colorism aspect of it. I do think that they probably looked at all factors because they did. I mean, ultimately, if we have the tiniest chink, right, in our image, they use that to flay us. They do it even today in 2021, right? A kid gets killed by the cops unfairly, and it's a white kid, right? They're showing like all of those pretty graduation pictures and sweet pictures with him with his dog and whatever, right? Because he gets to be a victim. But if it's a black person, even if it's a kid, right? What do? They dig up, even if it's a Halloween costume, they don't care. When you were 6, they dig up everything that they can to try to make you look like a gangster, like a hoodlum, or like a criminal. So I think we were definitely well aware of the fact that they were always trying to criminalize our image. So, whenever you're trying to, I mean, they do it with George Floyd now. How dare we use George Floyd as an image of anything, right? Because his background isn't spotless and he, didn't graduate from some STEM program with a clean record. Like, who cares about him turning around his life? Who cares about what he was doing to correct the mistakes he had made in life, right? Because Black people are not allowed to make mistakes and then correct them and come out bigger and better, like white people do. Because for the record, right, it's not that we commit more crimes. It's not that even in school, from school-age children, they've done research on this. They have put secret cameras in classrooms so that way even the teachers didn't know that those were there, just to observe behavior. And what they've noticed, right, is that Black children were criminalized, punished, sent to the office, even suspended for the smallest things. Whereas in white kids, the exact same behavior was either not even acknowledged, or maybe or even lightly tapped on the wrist. Maybe sometimes it might have been allowed to be applauded because, class can laugh at it and we can move on in life, right? Whereas in the Black kid was criminalized. So what we have to recognize, right, and these narratives start from as soon as we hit school. So again, when you keep going back, Ray, and I understand you don't think that you're propagating this message, but when every time you give an answer, you just go back to the bottom 5% who are gangbangers and selling drugs and whatever, and you ignore the other like 90% of Black people, which is really the demographic you need to be talking to or talking about in this discussion. You are propagating that message because you keep turning every answer into let's talk about why the bottom 5% represent all Black people, so therefore we should be talking solely about them instead of talking really about this.
Well, how about we do an integrity challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And integrity would say if your message is one that is truly for the Black male. I mean, there's Ray Ray right there at the corner. Standing on the corner in front of the liquor store. Go tell him how arbitrary that he is. Go tell him how much of a piece of shit that he is to his face. And record the whole thing and see what kind of a reaction that you get. Now, if Ray Ray, knocks your teeth out, then you just say that, well, your message was complete bullshit because even Ray Ray thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like something completely ridiculous to do. However, the point that I'm talking about,
I mean, it can't be that ridiculous. What's the difference?
Let me make my point since you made your point. My point is about investing in young men, Black young boys, to provide them the type of leadership and guidance to be excellent young men and adult men who are productive contributors to society. So unfortunately, as we talked earlier in the show with Char, the Pookies and the Ray Rays hanging about by the liquor store, according to Eugene Robinson in his book Disintegration, that's the abandoned class. And so the investment in them.
It makes the assumption that Black men or Black boys in their base form are basically useless to society. We gotta go and make them into something in society because as boys, they're basically useless to society. So that's what that literally is what that message propagates.
What message were you referring to, Gray? Go over that again.
Their respectability politics. It makes the assumption that Black boys are inherently useless until you show your faith-based leadership to them and make them.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we've got to reach Black young boys from age 3 on to make sure that they can read, write, spell, compute, that they can adapt in a digital economy, that they can be productive to themselves and productive to each other people, that they will be committed and disciplined to personal excellence so that they can change the course. And that means investment in them. That means investment in education, investment in healthcare. What I'm saying is that one of the reasons that the society at large and a lot of Black politicians are blocked from getting the type of investment in Black boys that they need is because the image of Black manhood is negative.
Well, it's not because the image of Black men is negative. They've been, again, regardless, if you just go through the history, and this is why, again, it's so important that these younger generations actually start investing in the history of the black people and Black community within America, because it seems almost as though like they think it was like slavery and then like nothing until now. And so they don't understand. They don't see, like, for example, Black Wall Street. They may not understand that there's like one, right? They don't understand that there were multiple, right? They don't understand that the Black community has overcome these attacks again and again and again, and that we're in kind of the middle towards the end of some more recent attacks against the Black community. But see, what happens is, because we actually are a more privileged generation, right? I'm talking about millennials and especially Generation Zs, right? Mm-hmm. Because we are benefiting from all of the hard work and all of the overcoming that previous generations did. We don't see it that way, right? Because we're comparing it to the non-Black compatriots that are in the country. Well, look what the white people got from the previous generation. Look how much they built. Look at what they're starting with now. And we're comparing ourselves to that. And then we're going, well, see, look, everything is screwed up because of what came before us. But the problem is, and what we're not recognizing at this point, give me just 1 second. What we're not recognizing at this point, right, is that this is not like an individual failure of the Black community from 20 years ago. This has been a constant, never-ending battle. Every time we find a way to overcome a problem, they find a way to knock us down with another one. So when we're talking about education and investing in education, well, hey, look, we have home ownership, right? Home ownership, and that's paying for our taxes. That's supposed to pay for what? Education. So then what do? They screw with the redlining, right? So that way, Black schools, in essence, the ones that have the majority Black children, right, are not getting the funding, right? Despite all of the Black home ownership that might be happening in that area, their money is going to pay for the white education, right? These schools and these states actually get a whole bunch of money, right? They get a whole bunch of money for bailouts and for education and for all these things that they are supposed to fit. But states' rights, they're allowed to do whatever the hell they want with that money. We see them doing it with COVID now. They got billions of dollars to fix the COVID issues, right? And what have they done with it? A lot of states have just held on to it. They're not using it the way that they're supposed to, right? So again, when we're talking about trying to resolve these issues for our community, right, we can't look at it as an individualized problem and not look at the systems, right, and not look at the government and not look at it on a macro level and recognize that, without fixing the macro level, it's going to continue to impact us negatively. Right. And not only that, but as millennials, what we need to recognize is, we're starting off at ground zero again. OK, so we got to look at what everyone the hell else did before starting at ground zero. Stop complaining about what we didn't get and the disadvantages we didn't get. And why didn't we get to start higher and just be ground zero again? Be ground zero. We have cameras now, and we actually have worldwide recognition for what's happening, and be ground zero again and give the next generation a good start, and stop complaining that we're not starting up there in upper middle class, and we're not starting way up there with a whole bunch of money to help us, and we're not starting up there with all the other people that we think we should be starting with, because you know what, we are failing this race right now for the rest of the community and for the generations to come, because we are too busy complaining and blaming ourselves for things that we have no blame for and we should be fighting against, and then we're not taking accountability for things we need to take accountability for, like, for example, our own ignorance about why our community is in this position as a greater whole. I'm done. Sorry.
I agree with you, Ruby, that there should be a macro concentration for advancement and a micro. So as you're talking about that we need to have a political agenda, we need to use our political power to deal with systematic discrimination. The second part of that, related to home ownership, is the importance of marriage. 70% of homes are bought by married couples. 20% are by single women. 9% are by cohabiting couples, and 9% by single men. So there's a correlation to home ownership and marriage. That's a microstructure. As we are fighting to deal with the structural discrimination, we also need to have our various social institutions talk about and advocate the importance of marriage and long-term commitment and family development, home ownership, wealth development, financial literacy. We do everything at the same time. We don't have the luxury of dealing with the macro, and then we got to do both of them at the same time. So I do agree with you on that.
See, there's a big elephant in the room, and that elephant is why are we even discussing or what the root cause of why would a group want to practice respectability politics? And it literally stems from the fact that this is people that don't really have a lot of esteem or faith in their group. That's really what it stems from. It stems from point blank and period. Low self-esteem.
I would agree with you on that, and that's what we tried to discuss. We have to have a different narrative coming from a wholesome
respectability politics
to build up the image of Black men so that they would have a wholesome image of men who are leaders, who marry their women, who commit, who stay, who buy homes, who build wealth, who fight for political power, who establish and maintain political power. There is a macro and a micro, and we are hurting on both levels. And that's why we have to fight it at the same time on both levels.
Okay, sir, I absolutely agree with that. Let me say this about that, okay? I think it is paramount for those who have gotten out of the muck. Maybe you were born in the hood. Maybe you were born into poverty and you've managed to build upwards. I know you probably think I'm going to say you need to go back and contribute, although, yes, I absolutely agree that that's true, because without leaders, without mentors who can go back and teach the majority who aren't going to be able to teach themselves, like, here's what you need to do, right? We're gonna have problems. And trust me, other communities absolutely do that. We fail on that because of this rugged individualism and because of this concept of leaving each other behind. But no, what I actually really want to say is that people who've gotten themselves out of the muck, people who've been able to build themselves, what they need to stop doing is propagating, right, jumping on this white conservative, i.e. racist stereotype message that just continues to only focus on and talk about the bottom 10%, and then to use terms like black on black crime as though crime rates are not always against normally the people who are in the closest proximity to you when we're talking about areas of poverty, which means the white on white crime rate is actually higher than the black on black crime rate, but they don't call that like white on white or black on black, they just call it crime. Right. And so we need to stop using all of this bullshit, all these dog whistle terms, pushing all of these dog whistle messages that actually give Black people, right, a negative perception of themselves, of their community, of what they're able to build, of what they're able to reach. And we need to actually start addressing these things properly. We need to start correcting that message coming from them, so that way the younger generation coming up, first of all, has an understanding of why we are where we are, understand how hard Black people have fought since slavery has been abolished to continue to build again and again and again and again, and understand that now it's our turn. And that's not because Generation X failed, the boomers were lazy, oh, they're all such losers. No, it's because of these targeted attacks that have happened to Black community again and again and again, especially in areas like education and home ownership, right? To make sure that they were holding us down, keeping us down, pushing us down, so that way they could rise, right? Because that's the way that the American system has been built, in such a way, right, that the top 1% rises and everyone else fails, and then looks at each other and fights each other, and no one focuses on the actual problem and then fights that.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Ruby. That's an excellent analysis of what we need to be doing. We have to have a multifaceted attack on everything. But I agree with you. And I think that, interestingly, we've come together because I don't think we were ever that far apart. But I think that by looking at some aspects of black male imagery, the things that you discuss, some of the loose solutions are similar. And what we've got to do is work together and also improve the image of black men in American society, not just by imagery, by the fact of their behavior, accomplishments, and achievements. We need black men in colleges at least graduating at a 20% rate. We need at least 50% of our men highly skilled, blue collar professionals. I'm talking about electricians, computer engineer, or computer type technicians, all types of things,
Right.
HVAC, roofers, housing,
Yeah.
everything that's highly skilled, high income trades. That's that
And the thing is,
50% base.
we have
Mhm.
that already. We actually have that. So what we need to start doing, right? Us shifting the black male image is not about all of the black males needing to suddenly do something new. They are already doing it. So what we need to do, right? And that ties into what I was saying. We need to stop focusing on the bottom 5, 10%, talking about them constantly and pushing that narrative along with the racists who want to push that narrative about us as though it's true. We need to stop pushing that narrative. We need to stop focusing on that narrative, and we need to shift the conversation and the focus onto the majority of the black community who are already doing exactly what you say. So that way the majority of black men actually represent the majority of black men.
I'm going to
Okay, I mean, I agree with you on that. So what is how did you want to do that? How do you suggest doing that?
I mean,
Well,
shit.
it,
I did. I don't even know how many videos in that series on the Gray Regime honors that I've already done, and so many more. It's like to fight back, you literally have to look at people that are already doing it and highlight them. Like, we already have a working model. It's called the Initiative. You can go to grayregime.tv.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yep.
Like,
And another thing
And
is,
there's our
hilariously,
brother's
there's a
keeper, which
working
is being
model.
implemented as well in different communities. The black female mayor of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, has gotten public money to put behind that. You have STEM programs at Boys and Girls Clubs of America in black communities that are being invested. There are a lot of things that can be done, but investing in the education of children is very important as well. And they've got to get a solid grounding educationally, academically, so that they can be productive to themselves and to society.
You literally just had one of the biggest financial scandals, misallocation of federal money, happen in the state of Florida, right? You got all this COVID money to get kids back into schools, and they try
keep people in their homes. Yep.
Yeah, they try to keep people in their homes, and then they pass the federal money around to their wealthy real estate development buddies to try to build a resort. If you remember the one of the buildings that collapsed in on like 100 some people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's the thing. We have a working model. What's really sad is we actually use this working model, but because we use it in a negative way, we use highlighting black men's accomplishments and where they are now. We use it against black women, right? So the narrative is still ultimately negative, isn't a net negative against the black community. What we need to do is use the narratives and the true facts that are being spoken about black men and where they have built themselves to today, and what they currently really are, which is not the bottom 5%, right? And we need to use that as a standalone message instead of always using that as a weapon against black women. Because when we are using positives about black men or about black women as weapons against the other gender, it's a net negative against black people, right?
It's really a gross loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because if you really look at it, all of these things, like from respectability politics to gender warring, all of these things have been injected into the black, both political and economic zeitgeist, really by outside groups.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at it, when you go back to that 1970 home ownership chart, one of the things that happened at the end of the Vietnam War, you had both what was called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which exported a lot of jobs that were worked by black people in the urban centers, and they shipped them to places like Malaysia, to China, to Indonesia, and what have you. Same with the car companies, which is why Detroit is still looking the way that it looks, right? With lacking the economy, like it almost eternally in debt. And no matter how much federal money that they've poured into states like Michigan, Detroit has never recovered because every single governor of Michigan has basically wrote off Detroit as a loss that it cannot be recovered from. But then, you'll have their so-called conservatives. They're no different than liberals when we're talking about immigration policy. And that's why you have such a high population of East Indians in Detroit, that no matter how much government money that has been used to prop these people up, it still hasn't recovered, even with the vast population of Indians there who are living in the same, or even in some cases worse squalor than what the Detroit car plants left. Okay, so understand, these are all of these things that we're talking about are American issues. None of these things are exclusively Negro or Black. Because if that's the case, why is it that you can see a white killer being humanized, and then not only that, being told to the public that this is something that is an isolated incident, but when it's Black, they're all like that. See, that's something that's projected from the outside, and it's all for one simple reason, and it's because the attack on things like Black labor, Black intellect, Black success, every time that it's attacked, it's always attacked from the outside, not from the inside.
Agree
And
with
what we're
you.
going to do is I'm going to say a few things, and you can stay right there. And what I want to say is Ray is listening to you, but what's very important to him, regardless of what you say and how you say it, he's going to continue to talk about image. That is very important to him. He's going to continue to say that regardless of what you say. Morality is also important. He mentions that quite often too. But I will say with morality, it doesn't appear to be working very well for anyone, whether you're in the White House or the doghouse. You're going to do what you're going to do. You're going to choose what you want to do. That's just the bottom line. That's what I see. And as far as marriage, that's important to Ray too. He mentions that quite often. But if you don't have any money, more than likely you're not going to marry. I understand he mentions, you put your money together, the woman and the man, but usually somebody's missing something. So a lot of times we're not getting married because of that, because that's such an important part of marriage. I want to thank you so
Yep.
much for your conversation. You never have to agree totally. That's fine. Just long as we understand each other, where we're coming from, and listen. That's all that's important. Also, tomorrow we'll have article reaction at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Tune in for that. And thank you again, everyone that donated. And then I wanted to point out, and CC that donated, I was not trying to pick on you, but one thing I've noticed, anytime someone mentions the abortion rate of Black women, they never, and so far in the 5-6 years I've been in YouTube, no one has ever admitted that their child was in that number.
Oh,
So
ever no.
just wanted to throw that out there, just to let you know
Of course,
you're
of
not
course
being
not,
picked on.
because
Facts.
of
I'm
course
just
not.
saying, I just
Come
haven't
on,
seen it.
Char, we're living in America, and
One day.
when have you ever known a red-blooded American to incriminate themselves?
Facts.
Well, yeah, I guess
Facts.
so. I guess so. Unless it's on Facebook Live. But other than that,
True.
thank you guys so much for tuning in.
And thank you
Stay
for inviting me,
safe.
Shar. I really enjoyed coming on. I think it was a really good panel discussion. We got a lot of things expressed, and I think we were doing it in a
Yeah,
civil
Yes,
way. You
sir.
really held up everything. Thank you, Shar, and
you're
every
very
Yes.
and Gray
welcome.
and Ruby as well.
Yes, no, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much for having this side of the discussion and actually being willing to elaborate on your points, but also hear when, we on the other side were making valid points as well, because I think this is the only way we're going to grow and repair ourselves as a community is if we can have discussions and come to understandings and at least disagree without disrespect. So,
Good
Yeah.
deal.
I want
So
to
you
say thank
guys,
you for
make
having
sure.
me,
Oh,
Lady
of
Star,
course.
and salute to the nation and all of the esteemed nobles. Long live Black nobility. Everyone know, please, hoorah!
Hoorah.
hoorah.
Okay. Hoorah.